Welcome to Council Chambers on this beautiful September 9th day. As you can tell, it's kind of a little gloomy out there and raining, and that's only because we love rainbows in our community. So once this goes away, we're going to have beautiful rainbows we can chase. I would advise you not to look for the pot of gold, because I've tried several times and I've not yet found it, so I don't think it's really out there. So don't hurt yourself if you do go chasing the pot of rainbow gold. Members of council, you have an agenda before you. Any additions from administration? Okay. Deputy Mayor, motion please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I make a motion that council accept the regular council meeting agenda for Monday, September 9th, 2019 as presented.
Thank you. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to our next item is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to talk to council about anything that's not on the current agenda. Is there anybody in council chambers like to address council on something that's not on the agenda? Okay, see none, we'll move on. And number 4 is presentations and delegations, and today we have the RCMP Musical Ride Committee for a presentation. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. There is a sign-up sheet, so if you can enter your names on that sheet. And again, speak directly into the mics so that the sound can be heard by everybody in chambers.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Administration, and the residents of Stony Plain. My name is Ed Burney, and I am happy to represent the RCMP Musical Ride 2019 that just occurred in our great town at Heritage Park. We're here representing the Kinsman Club of Stony Plain, the Stony Plain Legion number 256, the RCMP Veterans Association, Mr. Loy, and the RCMP detachment, which is the new detachment, Parkland, which the flag raising was today. We come before you today, Mr. Mayor, to thank the town of Stony Plain for its support, not only the town as in the council, but the administration and the great team from the pavilion, from Public Works, and from here at the town office. This was a true community event, and we could not have pulled it off without your support. We're happy to report that nearly 6,000 people attended the event and saw the 2 shows, visited the stables, and all of the static displays that we had at site. And I think we set a record for collectibles and souvenirs of the ride sold, so that just speaks to how everybody loved it. Some of the highlights was the landing of the helicopter. I've seen a lot of social media on that. I think we were the only Alberta ride that was able to access that, so we're very thankful to the RCMP. Also, the dog team did a little performance. So we had a puppy in training that would have licked the perpetrators to death, but then one of the working dogs showed how it was done. We again would just like to give our thanks from the committee and thanks to the town. And also, while we're here, so many of the volunteers, we had 1,600 volunteer hours put in to bring the musical ride to Stony Plain. So we have something to present to council.
Okay. So before we do that, just want to, on behalf of council and the residents, thank you very much for the work and dedication that the committee did. I know it's not an easy job to pull something like this together. I think when Cal came to us at the beginning of this saying he had hair, and now it's most of it gone. I think he was pulling it out regarding the stables and how to get the dirt there and everything else. So I'm glad that it happened, and he still has some hair left. So good job, Cal. You managed to keep some of that. But it is, as you mentioned, it is the partnerships between many organizations that make this community work. And the RCMP Musical Ride is just one of those examples. Between the Kinsmen, the RCMP Vets, and the Royal Legion, the Royal Canadian Legion 256. Without that collaboration and cooperation, this doesn't happen. So thank you for setting that bar for our residents to see, and also for members of council to see that we need to work together to accomplish great things. So thank you. So do you want to?
We have a presentation.
Sure. Members of council, would you like to join me?
Mr. Mayor, this is a photograph of the RCMP Municipal Riot, and it is signed by Superintendent Fahy, who was at the event, and it's our appreciation to council, and as we said, to town administration, public works, and the team at the Heritage Park.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Kevin, make you want to bring it out? Yeah, well, not really, but. Thank you, sir.
It was. All right. That was a great presentation. It's always good to see a successful event in our community. I think it brought people from not only in our community, but from Spruce Grove on away, as far as Edmonton, a few people from, I met one couple from Whitecourt, so that's just good just to have that draw and having people come to our community. Okay, so that ends our presentations and delegations. Today we're going down to a statutory public hearing, which is the Old Town Community Core Plan, which is bylaw 2613 DNP 19. So this is a public hearing. So this is an official hearing which records are kept. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the plan. First, we'll have a presentation by the engineers and the contractors. To do that, any questions of clarity and understanding will be asked by members of council. Then after that, we'll have anybody that is in favor of the proposed bylaw changes has an opportunity to speak and make comment. And again, council gets the opportunity to ask for questions of clarity and understanding. And those that are opposed to the proposed bylaw changes has the opportunity to speak and address council. And again, council gets to ask questions of clarity and understanding. And after that, anybody that has a general comment regarding the plan or suggestions at that time has a chance to address council. And then council has the opportunity to ask questions of clarity and understanding. And after that, then the applicant gets the chance to summarize anything. And again, council gets to ask questions of clarity and understanding. Then when that's completed, that completes our public hearing, and it'll be dealt later on in business items. Okay. So with that, I will officially call bylaw 2613 DNP to order. And go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Old Town Community Plan is a plan that we've been working on for the past 2 years. It comes out of within our planning work, in the planning framework in Stony Plain here, it's under what I have circled as the area structure plan.
Tom, excuse me a second. Can you turn up the volume there and speak directly into the mic?
Okay. In our framework here, you actually don't see area redevelopment plan, which is what the Old Town Community Plan is. This is because it is actually the town's first area redevelopment plan. Again, this is the public hearing for this. And as I had mentioned earlier, the plan comes from the municipal development plan. These are the 3 areas of transition. So the municipal development plan was updated approximately 5 or 6 years ago. And it established 3 different areas that were the older parts of town where redevelopment is already occurring or is to occur in the near future. These are Old Town North, the highway corridor along Highway 779, as well as a portion of 49th Avenue, and Old Town, or the area around Main Street. The context of the plan, again, refined slightly, is this black border around here. And if you've noticed, there's a dotted line that represents the areas of influence. So when we were doing this plan, we wanted not just to consider what was within its boundary, but what was surrounding it as well. In terms of the project timeline, there are 4 phases, which started in February 2018, including the background analysis, consultation, and visioning. This was a point in time where there was a lot of public engagement to extract from the community what their values and their visions were for the area. From that work, we led into phase 2, which went from May to October 2018 and involved a design analysis and alternative solutions. And in this portion, we designed 2 different scenarios and refined those through additional consultations with the community. In phase 3, which took place from November 2018 to June 2019, and this involved the final design and plan development. This is where those 2 different scenarios, the best parts, the part the community enjoyed the most, were combined into one final draft, and that led to the design that we'll see later on in the show here. And from that design, we created policies, which are the essence of the plan. We are now in the phase 4 of the approvals, which started in June and is continuing until now in September. For this public hearing, it was advertised in the Stony Plain Reporter on August 23rd and 30th. It was posted on the website here. You can see in the bottom a little snippet from the webpage. And we did a circulation to the areas surrounding. So again, the black area, shaded area, represents the confines of the plan itself, but we wanted to make sure, again, kind of that areas of influence was also included. So everywhere within the red outline was mailed a letter, notification letter about the project. In total, administration mailed out a total of 2,802 notices. From that, we've received 28 direct contacts or comments on that, including 14 phone calls, 3 emails, 3 in-person inquiries, and 3 letters. Comments ranged from general inquiries, hoping to better understand why they were notified, the purpose of the plan, and the areas it covered, as well as landowner questions about how the plan will impact landholding, their landholding, as well as existing districting, and specific aspects of the plan, including concerns about 49th Avenue extension, the proposed road network surrounding and connecting the recreation and cultural campus, high-density development on Highway 779, and traffic impacts, stormwater management capabilities considering full build-out of the plan, and some perceived lack of heritage preservation within the plan itself. Of these, there were several notices that were returned to administration, deemed undelivered. In total, the supplement here that I'm reading from council and administration, and there are some copies for the those in the gallery. We include a detailed description of when the inquiry came in, what the inquiry was, what it was about, and when there was follow-up or attempted follow-up for that. The 3 letters are also included in this package. Getting into the plan here, you'll notice it divides the area into a variety of character areas, including Main Street, this orange area here. The area surrounding that in light green is known as the the town core area. To the north is Old Town North. The highway corridors here, highway commercial corridors is what that area is called. The yellow areas that kind of are on the periphery of the plan in general are the mature residential areas, and then surrounding the areas kind of between Stony Plain Central, where it currently is, as well as the swimming pool and the arena, we have the recreation and cultural campus character area. This here is a detailed plan that outlines additional building topologies, connections, future roads, and shows more details of the plan. And I'll just mention our consultants, Green Space Alliance, is here to give some additional background context I'm just going over some of the key maps at this point here. This here's the transportation map showing new potential connections or improvements to existing roadways to deal with the additional intensification of these areas. The public realms map shows additional trail connections and areas where we want pedestrian connectivity, as well as other forms of transportation. The social infrastructure shows the various areas where there is existing future social space, including recreation, communication, education, and institutional. The servicing map shows that most of the area is well serviced. There are 2 areas highlighted here in an outlined red color that show areas of additional urban services in the future. And then the Stony Plain Urban Core, one of the requirements under the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan is that we need to specify the core area of town that has the intention to intensify. Again, these numbers are aspirational. The MRB requires or desires 100 dwelling units per net residential hectare. And in this case, we've outlined the main street as well as the town core around that in our attempt to meet those numbers. And then at the end of the plan, it goes over a variety of catalyst projects and shows an implementation framework touching on various different aspects that are required to make this plan come to light. 2 major things to consider are the integration of the future update to the municipal development plan and the land use bylaw updates that are currently being worked on by the town administration, and how this plan here will help set a tone for those documents. With that, if there's any questions, I'm here, and other than that, I would pass it off to our consultants for further information on the plan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councilor Lowry?
Worship, and through you to administration, I noticed the advertising dates of August 23rd and August 30th. Can you provide the date that the mail-out communication was provided?
At this time, through your worship to Councillor Lowry, I don't have the exact date. It is in the package. I believe it was approximately the same time. August 21st. The date that it was sent out that I'm hearing here in the audience is August 21st.
First, and a follow-up, Your Worship?
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. First reading of this bylaw was approved on June 10th originally. I know there was obviously countless communications that went out through the town's communications departments and social media. I'm just wondering if there's reasoning or justification why the notices weren't sent out or advertised earlier to give residents more time to look into the plan, ask questions, and receive some answers prior to the public hearing.
Through your worship to Councillor Lowry, in general, we want those questions and comments to come to the public hearing and be part of the public hearing. So in terms of allowing additional time, there may have been some additional time to allow more information to be presented, but ultimately the public hearing is where that discussion should take place and where the residents and the community in general should be able to provide their feedback directly to council.
Thank you.
Any other questions? See none. Is you guys ready to do your next presentation? So good evening. There is a sign-up sheet there, so if you guys can sign in. And then also if you need to speak directly into the mics so that your voices can be picked up.
You're already on, right? Disconnecting.
See. And technology works great when it works, but it takes a little time when it's not. Yes, it does. Takes a longer time to get it going because everybody's watching. I was told that I couldn't sing by my wife and my kids.
How about you do it and we'll see. Gordon, you must know the song or two.
Well, I do if you can lead it off.
No, we'll wait for
It's all works well.
We have an IT guy. Or we could all spend 5 minutes pretending like we know what we're doing.
And just
Okay, that's.
thank you.
And, yeah, yeah. Good. Okay. Finally, we are set. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Jnanesh Deshpande. I'm a principal with Green Space Alliance based in Edmonton. And with me, we have our entire team. I have Lucas Sherwin from Green Space Alliance. He's a project planner. We have Jeff Shurchik from ISL Engineering, and we have Gordon Molnar from Pillar Systems. So for last approximately 2 years, our team has been working with your community to develop this Stony Plains Old Town Community Plan. And I just have a 5-minute quick highlight presentation about the plan that we have developed. Just to reiterate what Miles talked about is the Old Town Community Plan is really a long-term planning framework for Stony Plains downtown and surrounding communities. And quite early on in the process, we made it a point to kind of like include some of the neighborhoods immediately in the surrounding area so that the decisions that we take in those communities can positively impact the vibrancy of the downtown. This plan was like really developed through a very collaborative and iterative process. Many of you were involved throughout. Oh. I think it's just the way, okay, give me a second. Better? Okay. So as I was saying, this plan was really developed through a very collaborative process where each decision was vetted through like multiple stakeholders. So we had a project launch event in March 2018. In addition to that, we had developed an advisory working group representing people from different stakeholders. And then we had in total like 3 public open houses. We also had, in total like 3 advisory group meetings. And as Miles described, the plan was developed through like kind of approval from all the stakeholders at various stages. The foundation of the plan or the structure of the plan includes 6 different policy areas. So we have like general development policies that provide kind of like policies in general for the entire OTCP area. But we had also developed those 6 character areas so that if you have an application in a particular policy area, developers or landowners can look into like those that specific location and they can understand what exactly they can do with their properties. In addition to that, we have like series of like policies for like public realm, transportation, social infrastructure, winter design, servicing, and urban center policies. So all that policy framework is kind of like laid out in quite detail in the plan. If I have to talk about the future land use concept or the future development concept for this area, this particular plan shows the correlation between various policy areas and the land uses that are like allowed in each of the policy area. In terms of the key highlights, we are talking about promoting your main street as a mixed use area. In addition to that, we're talking about like extension of like Main Street in the long run again towards the north and the south of your existing Main Street. We're talking about like residential and commercial infill development in your town core, mid-rise residential intensification along Highway 779 corridor. We're talking about like low-scale infill residential development in your established residential neighborhoods immediately surrounding your Main Street and the town core. And we are also talking about like development of recreational, educational, and cultural hub within the special study area that was defined in the municipal development plan. In total, to implement any plan, you need a strong implementation plan, and this Old Town Community Plan has a very extensive section at the end of it that defines like number of like catalyst projects that are essential to be implemented by public sector and also like through partnerships with private sector. So there are like 9 key tangible, like catalyst project, which if they are implemented in next few years, they can be really trigger like investments within Stony Plain downtown. So the first one is the town square and the gathering place. The second one is like cultural anchor and museum within the recreational policy area. We are talking about like developing number of like entrance features to make sure that downtown is visible from people passing by, extending municipal servicing in the Old Town North area, establishing some transit hubs, and we have identified those exact locations, and that was definitely developed through like public consultation, exploring the feasibility of an underpass connection, like towards the west of the uh, downtown area, providing opportunities for Main Street parking patios. Again, like making sure that in the summer months, the Main Street is quite vibrant through support like from property owners on both sides. And then a new Old Town North roadway alignment. So in order to implement some of the ideas that we're talking about, you need to again work with private property owners as the redevelopment happens to develop some new public streets in that area. And then last but not the least, recreation and cultural campus, which is in the southwest corner of the plan area, developing a parking management strategy for that. The plan at the end of it, like also has a extensive action plan, as I talked about it. It has like number of priority actions, and we have given them a priority, like what needs to be done in next 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and so forth, so that your departments, like exactly know which projects need to be undertaken in the short term. So we have also identified a number of like high priority actions that should be implemented in next 5 years. And we have divided them into like 6 different categories. So what needs to happen in terms of like regulation and policy, what additional studies need to be taken to implement this plan, some of the incentive programs that are essential to make sure that reinvestment happens in your downtown, some of the partnerships, advocacy measures, and then last but not the least, ongoing monitoring and review, of this plan. So all that is like laid out, like in the Old Town Community Plan. And this is my last slide. Really, we strongly feel that the current version of the Old Town Community Plan will serve as a lasting and achievable vision for the town of Stony Plain so that different stakeholders can work together to establish and enhance the vibrancy of your downtown. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation. And we're really here to hear, like what people have to say. So we are also looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding? Okay. Seeing that, maybe just one question. So with the Old Town Community Core Plan, as I mentioned earlier, so this will be, if council accepts it and provides the kind of draft for what's happening in the old parts of the community, that will be embedded into the MDP and the land use bylaw? Is that how that works?
Mr. Mayor, our understanding is that it is a separate bylaw in itself, so it's just like your Director of Planning and Development explained. It is like an area structure plan, so it should be implemented through land use bylaw amendments and so forth. So.
Okay.
It does also have to be in alignment with those plans all be in alignment.
Okay, good, and that's what I just wanted the clarity on, because I believe the MDP is the overarching development plan for our community, and that does not align with the Old Town Community Core Plan, then who overrides what? So that's, thank you. Anything else? Okay, see none, thank you very much.
Good, yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so we'll move on to the next phase of the public hearing. This is the time that everybody that's in favor of the proposed bylaw change can step forward and make comments or speak in favor of the bylaw change. Actually, it wouldn't be bylaw change because we've actually don't have an Old Town Community Core Plan, so this is new. Anybody have in favor of the changes? Seeing none, we'll move. Next phase is, and those that are opposed or have comments that differ from what is being proposed on the bylaw can step forward now.
Question I have, everything looks nice on that paper, straight line. What's the extent of the bylaw? Like, Main Street to the south, how far south are you going?
Okay, So that's with, that is actually in a very, very old area structure plan, which encompasses the quarter section to the south of the Glens, and that actually goes all the way down to 628. That's back in the 80s that was approved by council.
I live right on Green Street, 55th Avenue.
Okay, so,
I moved once already for the widening of 779, do I have to move again?
okay. So you have some general comments, so once, we'll just go to the next one, and I'll bring you to the front, and you can actually sign in, so we can register you there. Okay, anybody else like to speak against the proposed bylaw changes? Okay, so move on to the next one. I think we have lots of general comments. So move on to the next phase is.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do I need to sign it?
Yes, please. Okay, so we're just gonna go to this general comment so that we know we all talk about everything at once. There is a sign-up sheet there for you. If you can, again, sign in and just introduce yourself to council and before you start.
Hello, my name is Lori Dick. Good evening, everybody. I live in Folkestone Place, and my question is the road, proposed road, that is immediately out my back fence in between the railway tracks and where I live. I was told that is a future plan, but I plan to be there for a long time, so I would really like to know, are some of my yard going to be used for the roadway? There isn't enough room there right now.
Okay. Can administration pull up the picture with the proposed roadway? So 49th Avenue is projected to go straight across and then veer towards the railroad tracks and go parallel to that to access to the west side of us. So the question is there enough road right away that we've acquired to have this road?
Thank you, Your Worship. In this case, the 49th extension west of Main Street, which again is pretty much where you see this blue asterisk here. Currently, it ends right at Main Street here, and this is 49th Avenue as it currently exists. There is enough road right-of-way to go through here. It's actually been part of the town's transportation master plan since approximately 2007, and maybe previous to that, I'm only aware of the most recent version of that plan. So since 2007, there has been intention for the town to build an arterial road on the north side of the area that is known as Folkestone Villas, Folkestone Place, this area in here.
Okay, so when Folkestone was approved, so there was allowance made to have this road behind 49th to extend through. And when will it be built? We don't know when that might be built.
Okay, so you don't know when it's going to be built, but I just don't understand how the road is going to fit in there. Is some of our Folkestone property going to be used to accommodate the road?
No, I believe some of the land that was necessary to accommodate that road was taken when Folkestone was built.
Okay.
So it was given that, so you're not going to lose any of your property.
Well, I'd also like to let it be known that I would not like a road. I've got a really nice, sweet deal there. I like where I live, and it's fairly quiet. All I have is the trains.
Yes.
And the trains don't bother me. So I really would not appreciate a roadway through there.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, and I understand that it is nice and peaceful there. The proposed roadway was earmarked back in 2007, and we'll see how development goes and if there's another alternative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sheila Williams. I'm just inquiring on, I live on 4920 54th Avenue,
Yes.
and right on the corner south of the post office, a block. Looking at this map, I'm just asking, will a house be coming down because there's a quite a main road going down the middle of it now. You have the 49th Avenue, the 54th Avenue going around like it does, but the next little road, there's a park behind the houses all there. So right there, I live on the corner.
Yes.
Right up at the top there, yeah. And I'm just wondering, that second road, is that going to be losing a house there to go into the park, or are they still sustaining those two back alleys going into the park?
Okay, so I didn't see this in the plans when we originally talked about this, because I don't think we're taking houses down. But this is the access to the Lions Park, which is 54th Avenue. So 54th Avenue goes west, and it dead ends at the Multicultural Center. And then, so it comes to the road, and then on the other side of 50th Street is Lions Park. So based on the advertising that was provided, that does show a road going through there. So, actually, can you zoom this in for us, please? Okay.
And you'll see the green
Yes.
space right there, it's a square, and you see a little green thing sticking out, and
Okay.
that road going straight out has never been there. There still is two
Yes.
back alley roads.
Yeah, so thank you, Sheila. So this is where we're talking. Sheila lives right here on the corner of the park. Let me get that straight. This is Lions Park right here. And then this is the Axe 54A that goes to the multi, which that ends to the thing. But also it shows right there that there's houses missing. So is the intention of the plan to remove those houses at a certain time to provide access?
The intention of the plan is that the existing commercial area that is Main Street here would basically be continued south. So if there was any potential to rezone or redo those houses, if, say, for example, there was interest in doing what's often a conversion of residential use to a commercial use, these areas would be allowed for that. The green that's indicated right here, sorry, it's fairly small, but what it's indicating is that a more direct access into the park space there, given that the current accesses are only alleyways, is conceptually determined. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily saying to remove those houses, but if an opportunity comes forth.
But how would you, what I guess I'm asking is,
Yep.
there's two meridians on that road, in the middle of the road. If that is a road going into the park, there are houses all the way around, you'd have to take a house out.
And through your worship, I understand the concept, I guess. This is supposed to be a conceptual plan. So if I can use one example that's quite near to the town office right now, if anyone's familiar, just behind the town office to the north, there was an older home that has been removed, and it's a parking lot now, or it's being built into one. That is an example where an older house was purchased by the town for future development. And in this case, this is conceptually talking about something like that. So let's say 20 years in the future, if there's the opportunity, this plan would give the town some visionary, sort of conceptually, that we would like to increase the access to Lions Park. I often hear it called the hidden park. So to open that up to make it more accessible, that's what the plan is showing. So again, please interpret this a little more conceptually than you may, but that there's the intention here, is to show that it would be nice if there was actually a green trail that went directly into that park to improve the access to that area. Again, it's something that's attempting to be shown conceptually, but it's difficult to sometimes interpret that way.
Okay, so just let me just follow up on that then, because it does talk about zoning and having those two houses there zoned green, so which is parks instead of commercial. Does that affect their current value right now?
Your worship, it shouldn't. Again, this here is indicating what could be. Again, there's a variety of, it's kind of like peeling an onion. There's different layers, so even if this is in place, the applicant would have to apply for a rezoning, most likely, and they would have to apply potentially for a subdivision depending on what's going on with that property, and then get a development permit. So all those things would have to be in place before this would even take hold.
Thank you. Gibby, did you sign in?
Yes, I did,
Thank
thank
you.
you. My name is Betty Gablehouse, and we have property along Highway 779. And it's, from the map, it says residential mixed use. My question is, what exactly does that mean?
That's on 48th Street and 54th
54th and
Avenue.
48th.
Through your worship, the parcels in question are approximately here based on the map. And this area in orange is, as a mixed use, the residential indicates that its primary use is intended to still be residential, but it could allow for commercial, office space, retail, and those sort of functions within those lots. But again, the dominant intention there is to have it as a residential area that has some commercial aspects. The town has certain zones that are such as our R8, which is a high-density residential district that allows commercial on the first floor, would be an example of what would be expected to be in those areas as they redevelop.
So the residential right now, is that zoned for duplexes? What is it exactly?
My recollection on this area, your worship, is it's an R1 district currently. And again, this is kind of the onion effect. This here is showing what the town would envision for those lands when future redevelopment is desired. But an application for a land use bylaw amendment would have to take place, followed by potential subdivision, development permits, and so forth, to actually get something like that constructed and changed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If you can again sign in there and just introduce yourself to council before you start, please.
Hi, my name's Pam Horn, and I live on 47th, just north of the tracks, and you're putting a road in behind. Okay, we all have our septic fields there, so what happens if they get disturbed after, like this is an old area, so what happens to the septic fields if they, you know, that, and my taxes going up.
Taxes, this doesn't deal with taxes because it's just about visioning. Taxes are done by the services that we provide. In terms of the continuation of that road on 47th,
Yeah, they're right behind our property.
yeah, right there?
Yeah.
Right. So that's proposed that comes down to the Parkland Gateway that was approved by council quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so this is all happens when development happens, so we don't know what will happen. So hopefully in that time that those properties there will be connected to the sewer system and it'll go through there.
How much is that going to cost us?
We don't know. That'll be,
Now we're grandfathered in.
yes.
I really don't want to pay to put it in and then can pay every month again.
Yes, and that will be, when this becomes closer to reality, that will be the conversation that we have. So this is just like the visioning exercise of what our town looks like in 25 to 50 years. Right? We know in the old municipal development plan that was approved back in the early 2010, 2011, these areas were zoned as areas of transition. We did that because we knew this was the older part of town. Eventually, we would need to replace sewer, water, roads. So how do we want that to look after we do it? Like, we can just change the stuff on the bottom, but what does the main floor look like? Like the streets, sidewalks, trails, pathways, etc. And we also know a lot of these homes are older as well, that eventually, within the next 25, 50 years, they will come down. That's just a fact of life. A lot of them will come down. So what do we want to see happening in this area? Do we just want to leave it up to whoever owns the property to maybe put a 4-story building beside a single family? So this gives us the concept of where it is. So if it comes from, the commercial area down to residential, and then you have medium density and highway commercial. So that gives future generations within the town of Stony and Plain and people that buy property here of what they can possibly expect. We heard one person earlier about this proposed road here. Well, that was proposed and done back in 2007. So when people come to the community, they know that there is a proposed road there that eventually will happen, maybe won't happen. If you look down at the Glens, 50th Street dead ends to a road, right? So eventually it's designed that the road goes through. So it's like foreshadowing what's happening, but we don't know when that's going to happen until that we actually get there.
Know when the roads are going.
We have no idea when. That's all based on development, market. I can't say that we're going to do it in 5 years, because if you look at where this is, that's to provide connection to this property. So until this starts getting developed, there's no way we're ever thinking as a town doing this, because we don't have the money for it. And if we do that, you guys would lynch us, because we have to raise taxes huge just to get this built. So development drives a lot of this. As mentioned by our planners, like what happens here is based on the owner. So when a house needs to come down, then if they're in the commercial side, they can say, you know what, I want to put a commercial side here. And then they can apply, and they change it, and they can develop it. But the town won't go and knock the house down to put a commercial lot.
Well, 25 years, any chance, luck I'll be in Victoria. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. I think that also answers the other question about how far Main Street is proposed, though. It's down to 57th. Is all the red is the commercial. And that is also to transition over the next how many years of development. Good evening.
Hello, William. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Please.
Ida Cox.
Yes.
And I live in the Gateway. Doesn't go through my property.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the property is on here, is it not? Somewhere?
My property's down, right there.
Right here?
Yeah. You haven't asked, you have my brain's dead right now. You have a utility all around my property.
So they're talking about utility corridors around the property.
Okay. You have a utility right-of-way all around my property. You can utilize that to do your road loans instead of going through my property. True?
That'll be considered based on what that utility right-of-way is. There's things that we cannot put roads on top of, like high-pressure gas and et cetera.
You got a sewer line there right now.
Is that high-pressure gas?
Ooh, it could be in the future. If they get enough people to the west of us, it could be in the future.
Yes. Okay, so thank you for the comment, administration. When the Parkland Gateway was considered, was the utility corridors considered in designing of the road structure?
Yes, Your Worship, it was. Just to provide some context on the situation, I believe the utility corridor that you're referring to is for the West Sanitary Trunk system that was put in. So the West Sanitary Trunk runs approximately, comes across the highway approximately here, goes down through this road right of way here, and I believe there's intention to put a trail along there. And that's as far as that plan. That plan only, the boundary of that plan was this line approximately here. And then going south was part of it. So the area between this area here and Main Street was added to this. Now through that addition, an access point needed to be added to the south. And that's why this road here was indicated as it is to connect into Main Street there to provide 2 access points to the residential area indicated in the Parkland Gateway Area Structure Plan in these areas here. And out of that plan, so this is actually outside the boundary of this plan in itself, but this here was indicated to end at the property line, and all that's been indicated in the areas of influence, but it's not part of the actual Old Town Community Plan area. The boundary again ends right here for what that is, but what it's showing is what the Parkland Gateway Area Structure Plan shows, that an access point would be here, and again, it's just to provide the potential if, in this case, your property, this land here, was to redevelop or want to develop in, say, an urban fashion in the future, whether that be 5 years or 50 years from now, that it would have the potential to have a connection directly into Main Street via this, if those other landowners create it.
I've got another question. You were saying that the road that's going up across the highway is there. Okay, we have got right behind our property, on the west side of our property, that is the trunk line there. That's like the east, I should say. The east side of our is also.
Okay.
Down there is the sewer line that goes across to the brickyard.
Okay.
So your line there is a little bit off, that one that goes across up to the highway.
Okay. And through your worship, it has been a little while since I've looked at these plans, but I believe it must go through here, which is why that road was planned to be along there, come over, and then if you're saying it comes along the east boundary, it may come through here. I was not 100% sure where in this area here it did come across the tracks.
Yeah, it
So thank
comes
you.
right behind, right on the east side of our property and goes to, and then that goes north and then it goes west along the north side of our property.
Okay.
That's how that works.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to take that one down, right?
Through your worship, the difficulty here is that it's not actually showing, it's showing, like, again, the Gateway, Parkland Gateway Area Structure Plan does show this road here, and it also shows this road here. So all it's doing is contemplating, and it's not approved. Even if it does get approved tonight, it's not going to affect your land directly. It would be an indication that if an area structure plan was done for your area, which would need your consent to go ahead, that there could be a road connection between where this road here is shown in the Parkland Gateway Area Structure Plan and this area here with the little loop into there.
Okay. So thank you. So back in the past, if you look on this side, so this area is, you can see it's white, so it's not quite zoned. So when Parkland Gateway came, they worked with these property owners because of time, so they decided that we can do this. So they have a road proposed that ends here, and the road that proposed ends here.
Okay.
So this road is proposed, if you want to connect that, it can come straight down and then down and connect. But until we get this area here with all these properties, owners to decide how they want that to develop and it matches into the whole property, then we don't know what that is. It's just area convenience to draw a line from here to here, just to signify that there could be a road connection later through there.
William, that white part is all my land.
Okay.
And you're not going to get it. But thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Good evening, thank you.
Hi, how are you? My name is Stephen Pelican. I live on Campbell Drive, 44 Campbell Drive. When the flooding happened, there's a few properties around there that got flooded twice. My house got flooded really bad, and you have drainage in front of my driveway, which is sinking. Onto my driveway on the concrete, it's sinking, it's hollow. You can tap it. And we actually, that day of the flooding, the first flooding, had town employees say that whole sewer system or water system has to be replaced. Everything's falling apart in that area. I've had the water backed up halfway up onto my lawn twice, and my lawn sloped. And then the guy across from us got water into his house all the way up to his house. So fortunately, we got that big rain, and I was told that the sewer system cannot handle the pressure of the water. So I'm going to see when the road is going to be rebuilt and the sidewalks redone.
Okay, so you are over, trying to find it, so Forest Green School is here, you're over here.
Nope.
Camp Drive.
See where that big blue area, there's this asterisk there, and then says potential roadway going into there?
Over here?
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Hold on.
Camel Drive's over.
Anyways, Campbell Drive.
Yeah, so Campbell Drive's over here on Forest Green side.
Yeah.
So outside of the Old Town South Community Core Plan, so this, so.
It comes up to a dead-end road, Campbell Drive, into that park or that plug-in area.
Yes, so.
That road has to be redone. Even in the cul-de-sac by my place, it flooded into there. And then around the corner, because I'm on a corner lot, it flooded halfway up the street. And there's various houses that got flooded in that area twice. Like we had cars floating down the road because of all the water we had. So I was just wondering if that road is going to be repaired anytime soon.
Okay. Just last presentation, we had the presentation on all the storm that happened.
Yeah.
And we're having an open house. When is that? When's the open? Okay. Go ahead.
Your Worship, the open house is September 19th from 3 till 7 at Heritage Park. So we would invite this resident to come and give us some information. We're interested in all residents who experience flooding and getting exact information from them that will help us in our work.
Okay.
Okay, that's 17th, sorry?
September 19th.
Yeah, from 3 to 7 at the Heritage Park Pavilion. So again, that's going through the whole report with anybody that comes to the open house, and then to hear feedback from residents of how that affected them, and then therefore then we can have a plan of how to address everything.
Okay.
Because if you look at the plan that was presented, it's going to cost $10 to $14 million to do everything that we want to do.
Yeah.
But you know that's not going to happen. It's going to be phased in, and we look at the highest priorities first, and that's through consultation with the residents and then through the engineers of where it flooded the worst, basically.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Excuse me, just Steve. So Tom's just going to go grab his card and give it to you so he can connect with you to make sure that you're aware of what day it is so you don't miss that open house. He's just walked around right now. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments made in general about the Old Town Community Core Plan? Okay. Anybody else like to make some general comments regarding the Old Town Community Core Plan? See none, move on to next phase. Administration, chance to summarize and highlight anything else?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing I'd like to add that I was not mentioned earlier is that this did go through the MRB circulation and it was approved without an appeal. So it has received approval under the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board.
Okay, that's good. And can you just explain what that approval process is and why we have to do that?
So the provincial government has set up the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board as a regional level of planning and government for, I believe, 13 different municipalities around the Edmonton area, including Edmonton itself. They have a growth plan. Second draft of the growth plan recently came out a couple years back, and it sets forth growth policies for all the members of the board, us being one of them, and through their referral, which stands for Regional Evaluation Framework, they require that all statutory plans, or the vast majority of them, do go through that process to ensure that the policies that they have are being met by the plans. So this, in essence, means that they have checked the Old Town Community Plan against their rubric in terms of what they want it to have in it, and that it's met that requirement.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. Okay. Anything else to add?
That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Members of council, any more questions for administration for clarity before we move on? Councillor Matties?
To the access, for example, the special area of the recreation facility. Right now, you would be leaving or having to access through 57th Avenue. And based on the fact that, so we've got Highway 628 to the south, and then we have Range Road, so 628 to the south, and then Range Road 11 to the west, and then of course 16A. So in terms of people accessing that recreation facility, what would be the highest priority road to access out besides 57th Avenue? Where else would people be able to come into that area and exit that area?
Through your worship to Councillor Matties, there's several different options to get in there. The plan itself, I'll just mention, proposes having an additional roadway between 57th Avenue here, going up approximately to the west of the Multicultural Center, as well as the potential to have a tee-off that would come off of 55th Avenue directly off of Highway 779. So if that was to be done, that would probably be the most direct access into that, at least the eastern side of that. To get to the western area, you would be looking at coming down 50th Avenue currently and going down Brickyard Drive, approximately in here, to access this. As the plan indicates, the Brickyard at Old Town area structure plan does contemplate a connection between Brickyard Drive, where it currently ends on the south side, down across, and then there would be a connection here for 57th Avenue, which is being constructed as part of the new siting of the Stony Plain Central School. In the long term, 49th Avenue has additional capacity to be constructed and expanded west, which would then again go into Brickyard Drive and provide that access. In the future, there's potential to have additional accesses to the west and the south, but those are quite far off in terms of planning.
Your Worship, may I follow up?
Sure.
So with regards to that, those options generally require individuals to commute through residential areas. Is that correct?
For the majority, I guess I'll add to that currently the site can be accessed off of 53rd Avenue, off of either Main Street or Highway 779, and indirectly through the grid that is in Old Town through any of the other avenues, 50th, 51st, 52nd, and so forth, by coming down 51st Street or 52nd Street.
Okay. So just to, I guess after that review, thank you very much, but my comment with regards to access, what would be, in terms of looking at the overall cost of constructing roads, et cetera, for this community, and the best way to access that for the long term, what does administration recommend as to all of those choices? What would be the priority and the best access at this, in the next 4 or 5 years?
Through your worship to Councillor Matties, at this time, I don't have cost estimates on any of those projects, not anything in detail. Perhaps GSA's engineering consultant might be able to provide some insight into the question, however.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I guess to make our sort of on a very high level, I think major what we're kind of looking for in the study was to kind of develop the collector network that was set up that residents would get to where they had to get to without any impedances, and which would avoid through traffic through local neighborhoods. And so right now, when you go to the arena, you're probably well aware of people going through 53rd. It's a local street, but it's used as a collector, which is probably not a desirable situation. And so the idea was to get that connectivity and functionality in place and designating those roads that should be functioning as collectors so that people aren't traveling through the local networks through the local streets. And of course, it's never in kind of a well-connected network. It's never usually one way in and out. It's usually kind of a connection, a circle, a connection going through. And so to kind of answer your question about which would be probably the most appropriate, it probably, coming from the north, it would be, I believe that's 52nd going north-south right now as one collector, and working its all the way through to 55th, but or 57th. But at the same time, 55th going east and west as being another connection.
Okay.
And those acting as collectors would be probably your main sources in and out, which would hopefully deter traffic from using the local roads, which they're currently doing today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor Mattis, you raised a good question, and I think every facility that we have in our community people have to drive through residential roads to get to, and that's just the way things is, because we can't just build up in the middle of nowhere. So I think your question is, if council decides to front end the money, which we'll have to borrow, would it be more prudent to construct a road going down to 628 or Range Road 11? Right, that is a corporate plan discussion, and that's probably more strategic in nature, because that's long-term forecasting and a lot of money that we would have to up front before we get any money back. And usually these plans are designed so that developers that own the land and people that want to redevelop can see where their proposed roads are, so that they know the staging possibilities so that they have to pay for it and not the town. So if we wanted to, we could have the talk another time about, let's put $20 million to build the road out to Range Road 11, or build the road to 628.
Your Worship, I was actually very pleased to hear that, going from the Perk building out and the other one, that those roads would be the priority roads to start with. That makes sense.
Yes. So even 57th is a arterial road, which does service the needs of the community, and also 49th coming down to the Brickyard is also collector roads, which means that they've been designed and built for handling more traffic, besides the local roads, which are part of Campbell Drive and those areas that are more narrow. Councillor Ian, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to reiterate to Council that you may remember that a transportation master plan was scheduled for next year, where some of the long-term transportation impacts of this plan and other plans would be looked at in some level of detail, along with various cost estimates, which enable us to make the best decision moving forward regarding timing and other matters as development moves forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking through this sheet that we just received tonight with the residents' concerns and some of their questions, and I noticed this one question that made me stop and think. The question is, it's a concern about the lack of heritage preservation, conservation in the plan. It's called the Old Town Community Plan, yet there is little mentioning maintaining the unique Stony Plain feel. Could administration or our consultants talk a little bit about that, that point?
Okay. I'll just begin by answering through the worship to Councillor Bennett. On the map that you see here before you, you'll notice, for example, all of the yellow areas. And I guess one way that we did find through a lot of the engagement we got and feedback for the Old Town Community Plan was that many residents like to keep their single detached homes and those neighborhoods that surround the Old Town. So one of the reasons why there is so much yellow area that denotes those areas is so that this plan actually preserves those areas as they are. It does talk about gentle infill, the idea of maybe having secondary suites and maybe a duplex where there is a single right now, but again, keeping those to lower scale developments and focusing the higher density commercial as well, mixed use in the core itself, and then kind of spreading that along many of the corridors that already exist today. In terms of specific policies, there's a few that touch on it from my recollection. Again, I can't recite it from heart yet. And I'd just ask if our consultants have any additional thing to add. Thank you.
I guess when we did like consultation, especially along like Main Street, we understand that a lot of people talked about like we have like really walkable, like character and new heights, commercial on both sides. So when we were talking about like long-term vision, we have really included a policy that talks about when the redevelopment happens, like you maintain that two-story podium, and then the additional development can be stepped back, like from the Main Street in order to maintain that pedestrian character along Main Street. There are also like policies that talk about like public art. You have like really successful like mural program. How can you build on that? So all that policy framework is there, like in the current version of the plan. And as we understand that there are no designated historic resources within Stony Plain. So I think that particular topic did not come really strongly in public consultation, but we really tried our best to incorporate like policies that talk about maintaining the character along Main Street.
Thank you.
Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, as I read through some of the supporting documentation, I found interest in the Pillar Systems report and the mobility study or mobility strategy, that was done, particularly sections on 274, 280 through 282 in respect to active transportation. Out of this report, one of the recommendations is that the Town of Stony Plain reviews angle parking within downtown redevelopment concept streetscape plan, and if possible with the current implementation, that it incorporate active mobility along 50th Street corridor in part through replacing angle parking with parallel parking and protected active mobility lanes according to national geometric standards. It also goes on to talk about using parallel streets in the time being, and it also then talks about the substandard active mobility lane markings in the alleys parallel to 50th Street due to safety issues. These are brand new mobility lane markings that were put in. And I'm really interested to see, we have a report coming forward to us that talks about these being substandard and actually recommending removing them mere, 2 years after these have been installed. Obviously, this report doesn't necessarily drill down and deep in necessarily to parking and things like that. It has a little bit on it that touches on it, but removing angle parking in favor of parallel parking to provide active transportation is obviously going to create even less parking than already exists. I'm wondering if either administration or maybe our GSA people, if they can speak a little bit to some of these recommendations in respect to this and where this might fall, and if administration is going to be taking a look at this plan outside, or this report outside of this plan, and some of the recommendations that were made there, and at some potential changes that can be done. And I guess I ultimately have a question as well, is if these mobility lanes are deemed already to be substandard due to safety issues, why were they installed in the first place?
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, I'll leave the details for the consultant's engineer in terms of why it is. My understanding, broadly speaking, is that when the strategy you're referring to was done, it looked at the ultimate build out. So this is assuming that we may reach those aspirational densities of 100 dwelling units per hectare. There would be a lot more impact, a lot more traffic and volume on the roads. And it's basically looking at, say, a 50 or a longer term redevelopment of the core and showing that using lanes in those circumstances, they may be sub-adequate. And then in terms of the parking, if you have high enough volumes on the major collector roadways, such as Main Street, that at some point it may be a safety factor for angled parking. And again, this is looking at the long-term build-out. If many of the singles and semis in the Old Town area were redeveloped to apartment buildings and there was additional traffic generated from those, more offices, more commercial, that sort of thing, that at some point it may exceed the recommended, or again, I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak to this directly, but again, those standards may be exceeded once there's a certain level of demand on those roads. And with that, I would provide any comments from our consulting engineer.
Sure. Yeah, I guess, there's a few things here. My purpose in this study was primarily to address issues before they become problems, and in related to kind of municipal infrastructure as a result of the land use development. So as far as kind of the land use development goes, it is very aggressive as far as densification, and it will generate a lot of parking demand within the framework of the current Stony Plain policy for development. There isn't a provision that the land use has to provide on-site parking, so it will create a lot of demand for it outside, and that demand will be very, very significant, like a lot more significant than any surface parking will be able to provide. And so an alternative strategy is required if you're going to really attain all that parking demand, and which will development traffic demand, and so the active transportation thing going into the future will be a very vital component of it. It has to be developed effectively if it's going to work. And the throughfare through Main Street is a main hub. It's a main connection linking the Heritage Park and everywhere through the community. So if people are going to want to kind of get that connectivity through the active mobility network, it would be very desirable to go through Main Street, but you can't do it with the angle parking because it doesn't provide that environment to do so. So that was the reason for that recommendation. And while as looking at the sort of the higher end set of elements of it, again my focus was to address issues before they become problems. And with respect to the bike lanes through the back alleys, you would see that was kind of compensated there, because you couldn't get it through the angle parking. But at the same time, there's a lot of impediments, through site distances, widths, all sorts of things. And so basically by that statement, we're just trying to kind of prevent a child from getting killed down there. And so, in developing those active mobility lanes, if you do them right, you can do them very effectively. They can be very safe and can be very valuable to the children and the adults using it. So it's just pointed out, for the community's best interest, that it's best to address it sooner than later before someone gets hurt.
If I could, Your Worship, just to add to that, I think it's important to understand that some of these recommendations may not be implementable now and might be more valid for future. So similar to how the current redevelopment of the Main Street area has taken place 20, 30, 40 years after the original development of Main Street, this is something that could be looked at again in 20, 30 years when we're larger, there's more intensity in the old downtown core, and these concerns might be greater at that time.
I would just like to add one key point that the mobility strategy was a supporting document that provided all the background information for the Old Town Community Plan. So we basically reviewed those recommendations in detail and created a policy framework that you will be approving today or considering for approval today. So really, the Old Town Community Plan does not include some of that language, but when we undertook that analysis, those were the recommendations.
Thank you. And just a follow-up comment, Your Worship, I don't agree that this is something that 20 to 30 years look at. I think, as was mentioned, it is influencing the plan. We do talk a lot about our trail systems and our connectivity to downtown in our plan, and I think that's one thing that we need to be very focused on and does need to happen, as was mentioned, sooner rather than later, to provide the connectivity to our downtown by alternative modes other than just vehicles. As we've heard, it's only going to continue to get busier and busier and busier through our downtown. Our current downtown redevelopment is improving the pedestrian access, but we do need to look at all types of access to downtown and continue to make sure that that's a high focus, especially if we are going to be moving forward with the recreational campus in the near future. So I appreciate that being pointed out. I appreciate what has been put into the plan to date in respect to that, and I certainly hope to see us moving forward with some of those initiatives sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions from council? I have a question for administration. Looking at some of the zoning that's currently proposed there, and I look at Highway 779 and just north of the railroad tracks, it is currently an institutional use, and the next couple lots beside it are institutional uses. Because it's on a commercial corridor right there, would it not make sense to zone that commercial? So when that does have to be redeveloped in who knows how many years, 15, 20, 100 years, would that not be prudent to make this lot zoned for the future commercial? Because it is right on the 5th, Highway 779, the main drag.
In answer to your question, Your Worship, when we went through a lot of the future zoning, one thing that was careful to be considered is the current use likely to be maintained there for a while into the future? Given that this is the Parkland School Division, currently, we chose not to change those zonings from those institutional uses unless there was a direct indication that it was going to be changed in the near future or a desire to do so. So in this case, that's why you see institutional along all of these, because they're currently under institutional uses.
Okay. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Yeah, one. Councillor Matties?
Bishop, I have a question with regards to the density and the targets that we have. So basically, it's talked about being more aggressive with the intensification and, of course, the impact, as we just talked about, with regards to multimodal transportation, making sure that our systems are in place, road systems are in place. But my question is kind of if we can get an idea of what that's going to look like even in the next 5 to 10 years. If we said that the Old Town Community Plan must accommodate between 475 and 1,125 residents over this plan. So that's about between 200 and 450 households in that area, in the area that's highlighted right now. So can you tell me what percentage of that would be high density in this Old Town area?
Through your worship to Councillor Mattis, it's hard to say. Again, a lot of this development would be driven by the private industry, the private development industry. Likely, many of these areas would be redeveloped as, say, apartment buildings, would probably be the most common. very similar to what's going across from B&G Manor right now where the library is. There's a 4-story building on top of that. There's several other 3 to 4-story buildings in the area here highlighted in red, outlined, I guess, in red. But again, it's hard to say at this point, other than saying that high density is sort of the zoning, I guess I can say, under these areas has a permitted use for row housing and like apartment style buildings, as opposed to singles and semis. They are discretionary use for those other 2 uses. So again, it's ensuring that we do get that density in these areas as a right, as opposed to a potential for the development as it sits today at the areas of these areas that are low density, I'll say.
Thank you.
Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Thank you for your presentation. And then with that, we will close the public hearing on bylaw 2613, DMP 19. And this will be discussed later on in our bylaws on 8.1, I believe. Okay, with that, council, let's moving on to our next agenda item is adoption of council minutes, meeting minutes. So we'll go to the RCM of August 19th and the GMP of September 3rd. If I can have a motion, please, Councillor Bennett, please.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Town Council approve the Town Council meeting minutes as presented.
Right. Okay. So members of council, have you seen and you read the RCM of August 19th and GMP of September 3rd? Any questions or comments or errors in those? Okay. I didn't see any, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. There's no boards and council commissions, etc. to review today. So before we move on to bylaws, let's call for a 10-minute recess and we'll come back.
Councilor Bruce, like, seat.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll return back to our agenda and moving on to bylaws. 8.1 is the Old Town Community Core Plan. So members of administration, any more comments?
No, Your Worship, I think we did a good job going through all the different comments and questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
So council, you've had a chance to read over the Old Town Community Core Plan for quite a few years now, and as each phase comes forward to us, we get a new glimpse of what could be the possibilities of our areas of transition that was identified in our MDP. And so it's good to see and put in some kind of vision to it. And this has been a 2-year process where we've invited many stakeholders. We've emailed and we mailed out and we've advertised in the paper to have people here, have people over at the community center and also at the Heritage Park. It's just to engage people and hear their ideas, because the plan that's coming forward is accumulation of all that work over the last 2 years. Okay. Members of council, any questions and comments regarding that plan before we go for second reading? Question, comment, or do you want to start?
I have some questions answered.
Okay, so let's, Councilor Laurie, I'll ask you to make this a motion for second reading and then we'll go straight into it.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council give second reading to bylaw 2613/DNP/19 to adopt the Old Town Community Plan Area Redevelopment Plan.
Okay, thank you very much. So Councilor Bennett, go ahead with your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, it's stated in this plan about development levies. Could you have administration explain to our residents exactly what that means?
Go ahead, sir.
Through the worship to Councillor Bennett, redevelopment levies are a form of development charge that is allowed under the Municipal Government Act in areas that are part of an area redevelopment plan. They're similar to offsite levies in the sense that they do need to be part of that bylaw that's part of the area structure plan or the area redevelopment plan. And within the area redevelopment plan, it'll specify, usually with an engineering supplement report, what projects would be part of that levy, and then what areas would pertain to that. In the case of the Old Town Development Plan, there are no levies, no redevelopment levies indicated in the plan itself. So again, no studies were done to that degree to find out or do that, and pretty much it puts an additional levy on those areas that are under transition, so that as they redevelop, they'll pay a levy to allow different sorts of infrastructure. It can be recreation facilities. There's a variety of different things in the MGA that are allowed under a redevelopment levy. And again, when we went through this process, we didn't have anything in particular to look for that, so we haven't included any within this one. Thank you.
Okay. And again, so just to refresh council, this is very similar to when there was the Heart of Town Association in downtown Stony Plain. That was a business redevelopment levy, so it was called the BRZ. So it was the business revitalization levy, which then took in a certain section of Main Street, which the property owners had to pay for the upgrading of the sidewalks and for the lampposts. So that's very similar to that. And as well, in a residential area is Meridian Heights. I think a group of homeowners way back when that subdivision was developed, they got together and actually applied to have that levy put onto their tax bill so that they can have their back alleys paved. So then again, they paid that over time, so that was like another levy. So that's an enhancement to a redevelopment zone.
So in this case, there is no levy to residents?
No, not according to this plan, but in the future there could be. So in the MJ, it allows council to add that levy if it's required.
So just a flat levy for residents?
No, so again, so if there's a certain zone that they're doing, then council, working with the stakeholders, and we can develop that similar to the BRZ with the business revitalization levy. So the town worked with the business owners, and then they came forward to the town and said, we want to improve Main Street. And then, but they couldn't pay for it, so therefore the town front-ended the money, and that levy went back onto the tax roll, and then the town collected that money back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have several more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm referring to page 87 of the package. And 7.2.8 talks about finer grain lots. I've never heard that term before.
So the term fine grain is basically a typical urban design term, and it talks about lots that are like a bit smaller in scale. So if you have like bigger lots, they're called as lots with bigger grain, and really fine grain lots are along your main street. They're quite narrow, so that's the term. And if it's difficult to kind of like interpret, we can definitely add explanation of that.
Okay.
Finer grain is like really smaller lots.
If I can add, through your worship, to Councillor Bennett, everything along Main Street that has a narrow lot is an example of this. Whereas if you go to the areas, say, around the South Business Park, a lot of those lots are a larger size. So again, it's trying to denote the difference between, say, a big box store retail area and one that has smaller shops, hence the term fine grain.
Okay, thank you. Page 99. When it refers to, Mr. Mayor, when it refers to the low-scale infill forms, what are we talking about there?
Yeah. Which page number is in the document? Because I don't have.
Page 99.
7.5.4.
Thank you.
Page 80. It's just slightly different in the document. In general, low-scale like building forms are really single-family homes, duplexes, row housing, and townhomes. That's just in general, yeah.
So it's not apartments?
It's not apartments, yeah.
Okay. I've just never heard that term before either.
Okay.
If I may add, through your worship, to Councillor Bennett, again, these are typically low-density but infill lots. So where you might have a single detached home, you might put a duplex on that, or a semi-detached. You might add secondary suites. It's basically just encouraging more intensification, but still at a low density.
Right. Okay, thank you. Page 142. What did I have to say there? Oh, a couple of things. Under the West End Green Corridor, the last paragraph there, the last sentence says, the town could consider designating these lands as conservation reserve. I think you meant conservation reserve. I'm a former teacher, so I catch those mistakes. And then at that same page, the privately owned, public accessible open spaces, the POPs. In my mind, I was trying to picture what that would be. And so, Mr. Mayor, I'm visualizing the 52nd and Main Street where Dr. Gardner has that, that lot that he kind of transformed into benches and things like that. That's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about that?
Yes.
Okay, and so we want to encourage more of those. Perfect. 143. When it comes to branding, yeah, this was an interesting thought that I had. At the beginning of it, we went through the beginning stages of the public input, and there was a real discrepancy between what people thought about the old town, and some of them thought, no, it's modern, we need to go modern, and other people said, no, we need to keep the, and so it was a real divergent of opinions there. And so when it comes to the branding, I was kind of curious as to how you brought that together to make it more, you know, we're apparently calling it the Old Town. So how did we come to that from those two divergent thinking?
Through you, Your Worship. I guess, as I explained in my earlier answer, like we really did not want to completely preserve like Main Street the way it is. Yes, we heard like completely different opinions, and I guess our answer from urban design perspective was what people really like is the human scale along Main Street, and if we can maintain that in the long run, you know, when you have your pedestrian kind of like streetscape development done, but in terms of like the build form, you maintain that two-story build form next to it, and then if the redevelopment happens, with the modern development, like new four-story structures come in, at least they will kind of like step back, you know, like from the two-story podium, and that was kind of like considered as maybe in-between solution to achieve like both sides of the coin, I guess.
Okay.
So that was one of the key considerations that we included in the final policy framework.
Also on that same page, Mr. Mayor, it talks about the modern mural program and kind of talking about a different kind of mural. And so I just have a comment on that, and that is with our mural program the way that we have it, yes, it all reflects back to our past. And I think that when you're thinking about this, you have to consider that the past is not necessarily pioneer days. Our past continues into the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. But so we could incorporate those kinds of images in our mural program. But what I want to veer away from, I've seen in so many other communities that boast about their mural programs, the one thing that makes our mural program stand out and be unique is the fact that it is actually based on the history of Stony Plain. I've been to other municipalities. I think St. Albert has a picture of an ocean with fish. You know, it's a beautiful mural, but it has nothing to do with that town. And so when you say modern mural program, and I know this isn't you guys, you're not going to be out there, but for all of us to really consider that when we develop more murals, what makes our mural program special is the fact that it's our actual history. And so just kind of be aware of that. And two more comments and then I'm done, and I don't think I have anything else. Page 145 talks about a report back, the multi-year review, and it indicates that it should be done every 10 years. And I think that's way too long in between. Comprehensive review and update of the OTCP should be undertaken every 10 years. I think this plan was made for 15 to 20 years, so please, you know, make sure that we have a comprehensive review maybe every 5 years and not every 10 years.
If I may,
Yes,
through your
please.
worship, Councillor Bennett, one of the reasons why we took this at a 10-year is due to the fact that a lot of these plans, when they are 15 years or plus, it's not to say that there's not going to be a tweak or an update or an amendment to the plan at some point in the nearer future than 10 years. It's just to say, to the lengths that we went to do this review for 2 full years, that level of engagement done every decade or so is generally reasonable for a lot of these long-term plans. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that this isn't saying that we're not going to update it in 2 or 3 years if things change, and we want to make sure that it reflects what is current at that time in the future, but just that in terms of a complete revamp, we're estimating 10 years is a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, thank you. And then one last comment and question. I took a recent road trip to Beaumont. What a lovely municipality that's turned out to be. And from some of the pictures and some of the ideas that were coming forth in this plan, especially downtown with the businesses on the bottom and residents above, I noticed that the main street of Beaumont has a lot of that. And First of all, I don't think, in my own opinion, that Stony Plain has had a lot of luck with that kind of thing. I can think of a couple developments that have not been very successful with that. The way Beaumont has done it is very beautiful, and that's kind of how I picture our downtown to be. But I'm curious as to know if Beaumont sees that, if they are actually having, if the residents above are being filled and there's no vacancies up there. I noticed that some of the storefronts are still empty. I mean, that's, you know, there's always kind of a lag there. But could somebody tell me if that kind of development has been successful, say in Beaumont or in other municipalities?
Sure. Maybe I can answer that question. I think you're referring to the mixed-use developments where retail at the ground floor and residential above. So in Beaumont, there are like multiple sites along Main Street, the Chartier like restaurant and the building, you know, that particular site, it has been quite successful. So I think in our opinion, what we have done, you know, like in this area redevelopment plan is to create a framework, you know, like for that to happen. And it's really a combination of, you know, like the vibrancy of the retail. If you have like those destinations, then the possibility of having like mixed-use developments along Main Street is quite possible. So there are like multiple examples throughout the region where mixed-use developments have been successful.
And they are being filled? The residents are above and commercial is? Like it's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and I can provide a little answer to that too, because I've traveled the different communities as I meet with other mayors into the different caucuses. Many communities are doing the infill that way, because if the main street or the commercial district in the heart of the community is only that, then the ability to have people come support those businesses is limited. And that's what a lot of the smaller communities have found, that if you continue to build out in subdivisions outside of that heart of the community, it's easier for them to hop into the car and drive elsewhere to another community to do their shopping, do their activities, than it is actually to drive into the heart of the community. So for us to maintain the downtown is one of the big things here in this plan, is that we need to densify, and we need to bring people in the heart of the community so that they can able to shop here, they're able to play here, and they're able to, you know, continue to live here. I think if we don't do that, then I think we will see a slow dying of our downtown.
I agree.
Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through your general comment and question in regards to page 90 of our package, which is map 10, page 71 of the GSA report. It's the Main Street character area. I'm just wondering, is that it identifies most of the intersections along Main Street as key nodes, but it neglects to identify 49th Avenue and Main Street as a key node, which is the first question. And the second is in respect to the identification of primary gateway features. I know as we talked through this plan, as we worked with some of the different working groups, there was talks about gateways, the kind of entrances to the Main Street. Knowing that the intersection of 51st Avenue and Main Street is one of our more predominant intersections, especially in the wintertime for a Christmas tree, and there are provisions within this plan to make that a more of a year-round predominant intersection. I'm wondering if, for one, why 49th and Main Street is not a key node, and for two, if primary gateway is kind of identifying our entry to Main Street, why it's all the way down on 51st Ave and not further north on 50th or 49th.
So I guess in terms of like 49th Avenue, I guess we were trying to identify locations that are within the Main Street area, which is quite a heart of the Main Street. So all those three intersections, you know, like, or four intersections, 53rd Avenue, 52nd Avenue, 51st Avenue, and 50th Avenue along 50th Street, they were identified as key nodes. And yes, we agree, 49th Avenue could have been another node, but I think what we were considering was like really pedestrian-oriented, like tight intersections, and that's why those four intersections were identified. And I think for 51st Avenue, it was more like having a gateway feature, and that might not be the actual, like arch or something like that, but kind of a sense of arrival, so that you have arrived at the center of this main street. So that was the thought process.
And then further question in respect to the documentation we received today from some of the responses. The one from Parkland County in respect to stormwater management, and it's seeming some of the lack of mention within this plan. I'm just curious from administration's perspective, and especially the recommendation to add the current conditions of the stormwater system. Is that something that's being considered by administration as an addition to this, or do we feel that the plan we have in place covers everything we need to?
Through your worship, through to Councillor Laurie, in this case, knowing that the stormwater master plan was being done coinciding with this, and the additional work that would be required to just do the engineering as part of a planning exercise for this plan, it wasn't part of the scope of this work was to get into the detailed engineering. Again, that would be often for part of the redevelopment levy that was mentioned earlier. So again, many of the comments here that are mentioned by Parkland County are sort of covered off by adjacent studies that were done municipal-wide as opposed to just focused on the Old Town Community Plan.
Okay, so as a follow-up through your worship, would it not be worth mentioning in these reports? So should somebody be reading this report and not aware of the various documents, studies, etc. that exist, would it not be worth mentioning in this report that the town has undertaken these other studies and information in respect to this can be found in this report, in report A, report B? I'm concerned that even though we have all the pieces, if we're not referencing them within the documents, and somebody is looking at this document and looking for guidance and looking for knowledge on that, how are they going to acquire that information?
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, in this case, we can. I guess it's something that we could do. I don't know it's the necessity, given the fact that when any development comes to the town, we do have a collaborative review process that looks at the engineering, the development, the planning, and it would identify those issues through that process already. So it could be added, but it may be a redundancy in that case. So, food for thought, I guess.
Any other questions? Yep. Councilor Meyer, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to administration. Just getting back to what some of my other councillors have been talking about. On page 142, we talk about the West End Green Corridor. And then on page 149, we see the priorities listed under capital projects, I believe. West End Green Corridor, and it has a medium priority. To my understanding, the West End Green Corridor not only serves like a nature and sort of aesthetic end of it, but would also, as Councillor Laurie was talking, a certain level of stormwater management. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, it would serve some degree of stormwater management. This here is the West Green Corridor, as indicated here. The thing to note is a lot of the stormwater management that this area might do might actually be upstream. So again, this here is a higher elevation, and then it goes lower as it approaches Rotary Park over here. So there would be some reduction in stormwater management. And again, that's something that we would see happen when these landowners here desire and are wanting to develop, that those things would come in place. So ultimately, it would have some effect from the stormwater management component of it.
Okay, just a follow-up to that. Would it not make more sense, as we want to get that area developed and all the rest of that, that we move to define and outline the stream course and those things first?
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, in essence, this area redevelopment plan starts to specify this area here. Now again, similar to some of the other answers I've replied to, these are conceptual. The town has actually been approached by the landowner of several of these parcels here with the desire to redevelop those lands for an urban purpose. The thing is that the creek is poorly defined right now, and part of what's going on actually is looking at where that creek could be realigned. And again, this is stuff that goes through the province, through Alberta environment, and may take a number of years. But again, these are some of the things that once this plan, or pending this plan, gets approved, they would shed some light on the desire of the town for having a vision in place to go through and further define this. But again, at this level, given that these are privately owned lands, it's difficult to directly impose what we would do in these areas.
Okay. I guess that answers my question more or less. And then just going to some other points, if I could. 7.11.3 and 7.11.4, it discusses snow, I'm sorry, that would be probably page 120 or just over it. 7-11.3. Anyhow, frequent and effective snow removal of all transportation routes such as sidewalks, roads, trails, and public and open spaces will be prioritized to improve accessibility. And 7.11.4 discusses about not letting accumulation of snow on the adjacent sidewalks. Through conversations with residents, and I'm sure you guys are aware, the bulb outs on Main Street do present challenges in terms of clearing those sidewalks. Is there a plan to address that or anything we can do to mitigate the issue?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Meyer, administration is aware of some challenges which took place last winter, and have had discussions with our operations group on things we might try this winter to experiment and try to improve our level of service in the downtown, including the maneuvering around the bulb belts, et cetera, and trying to get the snow cleared away efficiently. So those discussions are underway right now, and we hope to implement some new ideas this winter.
Okay, just if I could make one suggestion there, I would avoid the loud blowing machines if at all possible. Anyhow, moving along, if I can more, yes?
Go ahead.
7.9.29, page 120, just for clarity, 7.9.29 speaks about active transport. Sorry, I'm just finding it.
That's page 116.
116.
7.9.29. Is this, I mean,
from what I understand, the idea of active transport is to make it so that we don't need as much parking, but then we are sacrificing parking to facilitate the active transport. Does that make sense to do that?
Through your worship, Councillor Meyer, in essence, what this is indicating is that when we're assessing future, say, rehab work for areas, say, around the gridded area around Main Street, that we would take an active kind of approach to consider if we should be, say, creating cycling trails, like some form of that, and also consider how how that would improve the functionality by removing parking. But again, it's supposed to be done on a case-by-case basis. So if there's several roads that have a lot of off-street parking, for example, those roads might be a good place to put a cycling lane, as a case in point. But ultimately, this is to be done on a case-by-case basis, and that's what the policy is trying to get at. Just that we can improve, we can improve our active transport or trail network at the loss of some parking, but that we have to be very considerate where we would lose parking given how crucial it is in certain portions of the downtown.
Okay. And then just the point right after that, snow clearance on multi-use trails and collector road networks will be prioritized following major snow events. Now, just reading that the way it is, that sounds to me, are we prioritizing trails over roads? Is that the idea there, or are we just talking the collector roads and trails over? Like, are we prioritizing trails over roads there, or are we just talking like the collector trails?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Mara, so I believe what that's speaking to is that if, in order to encourage active transportation, they can't have snow on them. So when there's a significant amount of snow, we would endeavor to start with the arterial roads, go to the collector roads, and while we're doing that, we would do the trails as well so that people could use bikes and other modes of active transportation to get where they're going. And then continue on down the line to the local roads and other less active modes of transportation.
So this is sort of in combination with the clearing of the roads?
Correct.
Okay. So there's actually two different crews, one that does the actual roads and one that does the trails. So it's not like we're going to do the roads and then stop and then do the trails. It's done at the same time because there's two different crews that are handling it. And then, as the general manager said, they'll prioritize the trails that get used the most will get done first, and same as the roads that get used done the most gets done first. Okay. So that's. Any more questions, Deputy Mayor?
I'm good.
Yeah. Councillor Matties, go ahead.
I just have a couple of comments. One is, first of all, with regards to the name Old Town, and I'm going to speak for the other half of the people in the community that have I guess a different view of what old means, and old often can imply experience, knowledge, wisdom, history, and good things like that. But on the other side, it can also imply needs to be replaced, no good, it's old, I need to throw it out. And when I look at Old Town, or what we're calling Old Town, I mean, I think there's so many new things about it. I mean, we're redeveloping the downtown. We have a new school, a replacement. We have a new recreation facility campus that we're talking about. It's all brand new. There's a lot of things that aren't even old in that part of the community. They're not even that old. And I guess my question is why could we consider something in the middle of this, so that still described, the human feeling of our community, the culture of our community. I just feel that we kind of disappointed a lot of people with, continuing on with something that has always been just because it's always been. And I'd sure like to see us consider, maybe at some point in time surveying the community and asking them, what would they call this part of our community moving forward? And it wouldn't have to be some new novel name, but it certainly maybe could be something that reflects who we are and what we are in this community. And not necessarily are we old, even though there's a lot of good positive things about old. And the second thing, right, yes. The next comment I'd like to make is with regards to the angle parking downtown and with regards to the more accessible transport systems that or traffic systems that we would have in the community. I do believe that we need to have an accessible downtown, a walkable downtown, a downtown that we could ride a bike at as well. I had the experience of walking down one of the back alleys, and definitely a vehicle almost hit me, and it was just because of there's just obstructions back there as well. So I think that that's not something 20 years down the road. I believe that whether we take that main street or it's one street over, that we make sure that we have the accessibility for people to walk in our community, to ride a bike in our community, and not have dangerous areas. I can just imagine a kid riding a skateboard down one of those back alleys. I do not feel confident that that's a safe environment for somebody to do that in. So I'd like to see that considered, and I do believe it's important because we do want to reduce the amount of parking needs, a lot of vehicle traffic downtown, and so having I was just in Canmore, And I couldn't believe the traffic. It was a Sunday afternoon, the traffic downtown, you could hardly even move. And I just envisioned that's what it's going to look like in here as we add another 1,400 or 1,125 residents in this community over the next 15 years, right? So it's important that's based on the projections that were provided in here. So I would love to see us make sure that in this plan that we are accommodating different ways that we can improve the efficiency of our traffic.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions, comments? Okay, see none. I have a question regarding the, where is that? Those little nodes down Main Street. In some communities I've been, they have wayfinding signs on those kind of nodes. Will that be something that's considered in this plan? So that if we make it accessible and walkable, and so people can just come down there, and then there's all these finding signs for these people.
Trying to find the specific one, but I don't believe I have it on the slide here. I know that signage was part of what we had talked about in terms of future work. I'll pass this off to the consultant who has more details than I do.
Generally, wayfinding strategies can be a completely separate document. So as part of this plan, we haven't included detailed strategies for wayfinding, but I think the way we have defined gateways and the whole aspect of how you move through the neighborhood and the roadway hierarchy and so forth, we have tried to address those points at a very high level. But wayfinding can be a completely separate strategy which can be implemented separately for this plan.
Okay. And then I know it's just on the question again with wayfinding. Highway 779 is a major arterial road that comes through our community. And then is it possible to get signage on the highway to direct people to Old Town, historical town, downtown core? Is it a possibility? Because I think we've tried and we have those little green signs, but it's not very vibrant, it's not very noticeable.
Yeah, I guess this plan, number 3, which is, I guess I just need to read those. Develop entrance gateway features for Main Street and the town core. There are multiple locations we have identified along Highway 779. And then although we are using the term gateways, they're definitely those wayfinding signs, by which, that they'll make people know that your downtown is towards the east or west, when they're traveling through. Because that was one of the points that we heard from people, that when people move along Highway 779 corridor, they don't know where the downtown is. And the whole point is, if we have some gateway features along that corridor, people can be directed to visit your Main Street and downtown, and that can be part of the overall branding too.
Okay. And thank you. And I bring that up because, if you've been through Canmore and through Banff, there's little blue signs that says downtown. There's arrows that you can follow and find the downtown core. And within our community, if you're coming off the highway, 628 or Highway 16A or even 16, and you drive down 779, there is no indication of how to get to downtown.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, again, just to reiterate that point, those gateways that we have identified along 779, they will be combination of signage and almost like placemaking, so that when you're passing by, there is sense of entrance right there with wayfinding signage leading you to the Main Street. So that's the intention of those gateways.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I'll ask a question that a lot of residents ask me is, because this plan is coming forward and if council accepts it, does that change the way they live? Does it change the way that they can do things in their backyard or front yards? If this is adopted by council, what does that actually change in terms of their livability or their access to do what they want with their land?
Your Worship, it doesn't necessarily change anything today. What it does is provide a vision for what changes in the future could be, and sort of guide that process, that when someone comes to the town with an idea to redevelop their land, we actually have a benchmark for what we'd like it to be as a community.
Okay. So it is a visioning long time. So if this gets approved by council tonight, it's not going to drop their housing values by 30% because now the town has a plan for their property.
Again, my basic understanding, your worship, is that the assessment value is based on what is and not what could be necessarily.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding that? Old Town Community Core Plan? Nope, I see none. Councillor Laura, you have the motion, so I'll call the question. All in favor of second reading? Thank you. And moving on to the third reading. Councillor Matthews, please.
The Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2613/DNP/19.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Question, Mr. Mayor. It is a comment. This is a major document. We've spent 2 years developing it. We've had an immense amount of public input. And I personally, I'm just really proud of the work that our consultants and our administration have done to provide, as you indicated, a future vision for our municipality. And I think that I'm really proud. I think we've done it the right way to have so much public engagement, and I just appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And I hope that our residents will come and ask questions and not assume that what we've done is going to affect them now. But yes, I'm just really proud of this document, and I thank everyone who's been involved in it.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Okay, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Well, I too would also like to express, I'm impressed with this plan. It seems very thorough. I think any residents that maybe have some apprehension, I would say it would be the equivalent of a new pair of jeans. It might take a little time to wear in, but in the end, we'll all be very satisfied with it all.
Thank you for comments. Anything else? No. On behalf of Town Council and the residents, thank you to our consultants for the work that you've done. 2 years is actually a long time to do it, to do a plan and to have that much engagement from our citizens. That's because I think Councillor Bennett hit it on the mark. We want to make sure that it was done right. So when we approved the MDP in 2009, 2010, right, we identified that this was the area of transition because we knew in the next 25 to 50 years, a lot of these properties will be demolished, redeveloped, and some of the vacant lots will be changing. So we wanted to make sure that our community had a good footing and understanding of what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I think this plan for the old downtown community core allows us to have that vision so that we as council, this council and future councils can rest that the town is secure and we're going in a direction that is was consulted with all the residents, a lot of residents, and moving forward to build our community. So thank you very much for your work, and thank you, town administration, for your time. Okay, with that, I'll call third reading. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Moving on to 8.2. Councillor Loy, please.
Yes, Your Worship, the Town Council give first reading to bylaw 2620/DNP/19 for the purpose of repealing bylaw 895, which provided regulations for the relocation and demolition of buildings.
Okay, go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it is recommended that this bylaw be repealed as the Alberta Building Code and other bylaws are in effect to regulate the demolition and moving of buildings, making this bylaw unnecessary at this time. The various legislation and bylaws include the Alberta Building Code, the Land Use Bylaw, the Utility Bylaw, and the fees and charges which are approved by Council annually. Other agencies and utility companies involved and affected by the moving and demolition of buildings also have their own requirements, usually through contracts with the landowner. So this bylaw, which was enacted in 1984, is really unnecessary at this time, and as part of our cleanup, we're recommending that it be repealed with 3 readings tonight.
Thank you very much. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Nope, okay, seeing none, I don't have any either. This is repealing an old outdated bylaw that we don't need, so it's better to get rid of off the books. I'll call the question for first reading. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. And moving on to second reading. Councilor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council gives second reading to bylaw 260/DNP/19.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to ask for any questions or comments from the administration. I'll just call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading of bylaw 2620/DP/19.
Okay, and if council does all three readings in one evening, we have to have unanimous consent from members of council. So I'll call the motion. All in favor? Thank you. And then Councillor Bennett, please.
I move third reading to bylaw 2620/DNP/19.
Okay. With that, any last comments? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to business items, 9.1, the financial trend report. Go ahead, administration.
Your Worship and Council, the financial trend report is brought before Council annually for information, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Go ahead, any highlights that you'd like to address?
Probably one of the trends that's on everybody's mind is the debt one, and that is a result of over 3 years, we borrowed almost $19 million. So in 2016, it was $3 million for Heritage Park. In 2017, it was $10.8 million for the RCMP building, and in 2018 is $5.1 million for Boundary Road. So all huge projects that we approved, and it has been administration's practice to use all other sources of funding before we actually access the funds. We have to pass the bylaws before a shovel hits the ground on any new construction, but we will hold off actually accessing the funds until they are needed.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, members of council, you've had a chance to read it, the report. Any questions for clarity or understanding? Councilor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned the RCMP. When we built the RCMP, or when we considered it, there's also a business case, whereas we are getting some revenue from it by renting out or providing leases for different departments. And so my question is, will the revenue that will be coming from the building help to pay for that debt, that debt payment? I'm also wondering about, you mentioned Veterans Boulevard. That's an investment for us in that when it develops on the east side, again, that will help to cover some of the debt cost. Am I right in my thinking, Mr. Mayor?
You're correct, based on the reports that we received and when we approved the projects. So there's things that we borrow that are funded from the tax base, which we all pay for, and there's things that are funded through other sources, which sometimes we'll have to front end first before we can get it back, and vice versa. And the RCMP station is one of them. We overbuilt it to lease out a portion of that. Then that portion of the debt is paid by the lease back. The other portion that we built for our own municipal forces, our RSP, we have to pay that out of our tax base. And that's very similar to Boundary Road, Veterans Boulevard, which is now, we've fronted end of that. And then as development grows on the east end, the offset levies that we collect from that will go off to help pay the debenture borrow on that as well. We can pay them off when we have the money, but there's also a penalty. So usually these debenture borrows are borrowed for a certain amount of time based on what the staff project that we'll pay back and how much we can get. And then if you pay it early, then there's always a penalty. So then you have to decide, is a penalty offset what you're going to cost right now? So it is a business transaction. And this is very, very similar to the servicing for Stony Plain Central, which council again decided to front end the project. And when the development of Old Town South, the Brickyard area there, gets developed, then we're able to recoup the money that we've borrowed to do that road and underground infrastructure. But it is on our debt limit, so it does affect our debt limit, but it doesn't. But it is serviced by something else.
So in other words, Mr. Mayor, to help me sleep at night when I consider our debt and the amount of borrowing we're doing and the amount of interest that we're paying, we have a plan in place that will help to pay down that debt limit so that we won't, so that the amount of debt that we're taking on will just be paying forever and ever, like I would on my visa if I let it get out of control. I just want to make that clear so that, like I said, I can sleep at night when I look at our debt limit. And going into our corporate plan, the concern that we all have with raising taxes and having a spending problem rather than a revenue problem is that we have a plan in place to help us to pay down that limit without it affecting our taxpayers to a great extent. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Loy?
Yes, Your Worship, and I ask people to go to page 359 of 442. And Councillor Bennett, I'm going to echo your thoughts, because when I read the 3 bullet points under the background, and then the basic, or the first set, and then the second one, can the local government pay for what it's now doing? I'm just going to ask administration and corporate services there to keep this as a primary guideline, so we do not get into a situation where we're going to regret it, that we're going to say we were foolish, we spent poorly, and now we have something that's coming for unforeseen. And I look at the thing that says, can the local government pay for what it is doing now? And to me, that's very paramount. I do not have that expertise. I rely on you people who have the accounting backgrounds and the senior administration to keep us on the straight and narrow. And so thank you, Councillor Bennett, and Your Worship, that's my wish for the next 2 years for sure.
Okay. Any other questions for clarification? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, referring to page 390 in the conclusions and essentially some of the recommendations for long-term planning. The first one talks about building adequate reserves for funding of future capital needs. Obviously, over the last while, we've used our reserves in many of the projects that we've talked about. We've borrowed against our reserves on certain aspects. Now, we do have policies for building these reserves and rebuilding these reserves, but I'm wondering if administration can shed some light. Will there be some policy changes, or will there be some plans being put in place during this corporate plan season that will help us address this and will help us rebuild some of those reserves that have been depleted?
Your Worship, through the Councillor Laurie, the one that comes to my mind when I think of corporate planning for this year that we'll bring forward for council consideration is just formalizing more of the asset management plans. So that's really going to be understanding the state of the infrastructure and how that's funded over the long term. So then you can put forth in place how that gets funded and how much you should be putting aside. I mean, there's a lot of different routes that council can take, and different municipalities are more aggressive on it or less aggressive. But as administration, that's one that's on our priority list to make sure that that's well understood, and so that we can start to take that longer term plan. And those plans have been in place, but we've had a number of master plans completed, and as you get more information and continuing looking at those things, it's important to keep our eyes on that for sure. It's definitely, you all saw the blue ribbon panel this week, and it's a challenging time for all municipalities in the province because of the number of factors that are happening at once, and for us especially when we've taken that debt and used some of our reserves and slow economy, uncertainty with the provincial funding, all of those things make you just be a little bit more cautious. And so I think that's what, when I read this report, and I think that's what it highlights a little bit. And looking forward to the, what we can present in the corporate plan and helping you understand that of where we go from here.
Thank you.
Councilor Matthews.
Thank you to administration. First of all, if I could reference page 382, which is the total reserves as a percentage of long-term debt. When I look at Stony Plain relative to the median of the communities that we've compared ourselves to, we are at 44%. And in terms of, if we look at our long-term debt per capita, it has increased fairly significantly as well. And we need to consider not only it's very important to establish priorities, and maybe there's 2 or 3 top priorities that we need to be working on to continue to build and develop, but we do need to understand there's emergency situations as we've just experienced, and that is going to have to be some funding towards that. We know that. We know that we have a challenging economic and political environment. We're not sure how that's going to change in the next couple of years. We're going to work with that. And then thirdly, as we've talked about funding, and it, not only on a provincial level, but that could change on a federal level as well. So it is important. Obviously, there's been some very good work done by past council with regards to expenditures that have been made. And as Councillor Bennett has mentioned, there is mechanisms in terms of revenues, et cetera, to support it. But we must be very cognizant of money moving forward, all of us. And it is council's responsibility as well to know that. So I would, this is you know, it's definitely a strain. Our financials are strained relative to past, and I'd certainly like to see us working very hard to ensure that we make progress with our community, but at the same time hold the line on expenses as well.
Thank you for your comments. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
Your Worship, the only other thing that the town manager reminded me of that we've been starting to work on internally is a fiscal sustainability plan. And so there's a few other municipalities locally that have rolled this out, and we'd like to do the same. And so it'll be working with council so that you're understanding sort of the different levers that there is to make sure that we are sustainable into the future, and formalizing that document so that you understand, the public understands sort of the different financial strategies and the planning and all the things that interrelate, because it is complex. So formalizing that in the upcoming year as well, which will hopefully make you all feel more comfortable and have some good discussion as well as to where this council wants to go.
Your Worship, I'll just add a few comments too. General Manager brought it to my attention. One of our close proximity municipalities had taken the step and had gone in this direction. And I can tell you that when I took a look through their framework, it did make a lot of sense, both to me, being not necessarily a financial background, but it made a lot of sense to me. And it certainly was a document that was publicly digestible to explain all of the different requirements, impacts, all of the different inputs that are required to ensure we meet those first 3 questions that Councillor Loy was speaking about earlier. Your Worship, it talks a little bit about the work that we do internally to bring forward the best forecasts as such. I mean, the challenge we can have from time to time, the better we work internally and forecast, and the better our financial services teams can pull these numbers together, the better decisions we can make through the current year, but also as part of the corporate planning process. So I can tell you, Your Worship, I mean, we maybe even be able to send some examples out to you so you can start to see what it looks like and what it may look like for us. But it did went certain, to me, it really gave me a good sense of what fiscal sustainability for a municipal government actually looks like in real life, if you want to call it that. That I mean, there were some principles, there were some guidelines, there was the different aspects of that, and it framed it very well. It was easily communicated, easily readable. So as the GM mentioned, we're getting to work on that, and council will see more of it in the coming months and year.
Thank you, and thank you for the the report, and it allows us, members of council and the members of the public, to look to see where we are in comparison to our neighbors and stuff. And it's also, I draw your attention to page 384 and 385 and 386. So those are our direct comparators to ourselves, which is our regional neighbors of Spruce Grove and Parkland County. You can tell their population is quite a bit higher than ours. Their property tax collected per capita, we're a little bit lower than Spruce Grove, but we're almost half per capita lower than Parkland County. So for every dollar resident, they're making $1,800, and we're making just under 1,000. And so I just want to highlight those things as a fact that in terms of regional cooperation and things that we want to do regionally, we need to work together to provide those services for residents. But some of those agreements need to be revisited, where we look at equity and not equality, the ability to pay, because if we can't afford to be in the same footing as Parkland County or as City of Spruce Grove because of their larger population and definitely the revenue that they collect from their taxes. And it might be coming down to where it's built new systems of regional cooperations in terms of service levels, recreation centers, etc., are funded by the three of us, but based on equality and equity and not equality. So it's not equal for everybody. It's based on our ability to pay. So that's a conversation that we need to have with our regional partners, because we are providing the services for everyone here. Right? Like, there is no invisible wall that stops a Spruce Grove resident from coming to our community, and there's no wall that stops Parkland County residents from coming to our community. So we need to sit at the table with both of them to figure out where is the best place, the most appropriate place to use and spend our money, so that we can provide those services to our residents at the lowest cost possible, so that we all benefit. Thank you. Councillor Laurie, please, for the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council accept the financial trend report for information.
Thank you. And with any questions, any debate, anything with that? No. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. And 9.2, we're moving on to Councillor Bennett, please.
I move the Town Council accept the advocacy strategy update for information.
Okay, members of council, go ahead, administration.
You and council this evening, I've presented a summary of, we're about to embark upon a busy couple of weeks as we lead up to the federal election, and one of the roles and one of the important activities that we as a municipality have to undertake is to articulate our opportunities to identify our priorities and what's important for the upcoming term of our federal representatives, and how it can best serve our municipality as we move forward in our role and in the role that we do in working with them to serve our citizens. And so one of the things that we have undertaken is, of course, worked with you to develop an advocacy strategy and monitor that, and how we dialogue and influence both those that serve us at the provincial and the federal government level. Over the last year, of course, we've gone through the provincial election process earlier this spring, and now we're about to do conduct the federal election process. And in the spring, we identified the priorities that reflect the important changes and impacts that we wanted to address with the provincial government. And now we're undertaking the same initiative for the federal election. And so we've drafted for your review and consideration this evening a set of 4 priorities that we've tried to succinctly identify what would have the highest level of benefit and impact for our residents and for our community in working with our federal representatives, and tried to articulate those so that we can share them both with those that are considering putting their name forward for the riding of our local riding, which is Sturgeon River Parkland, but also for our residents and our ratepayers and our stakeholders that work with us, and in their thoughts and conversations as they're looking to the fall election as well, and what's important for them as a resident of the community and in working with us as their partners. So the 4 priorities that we've laid out for your consideration and for the community's understanding is, first and foremost, funding that we receive through the federal government through the gas tax fund. This is a unique and very important source of revenue that we utilize primarily for infrastructure improvements and work that we've done. We've highlighted two very specific projects where we've utilized those resources for the construction of the Heritage Park Community Centre, as well as our work that we're doing right now on downtown redevelopment. So an important component of how we fund those projects is through the gas tax funds that we receive from the federal government. We were fortunate in 2019 to receive a significant increase in funding through that source of revenue, and one of the positions, of course, we would certainly like to see articulated going forward with the new federal government is that the fundings remain at that level. It's not a certainty, and so I think it would be important for us to articulate that that certainty would certainly be greatly appreciated and valued, and much to the benefit of this community as well as municipalities across the country. The second priority that we've identified is, of course, more specifically with regards to community safety, and one of our significant pieces of infrastructure that rolls through this community is our CN rail line, and we've worked actively with them over the last number of years to maintain the improvements and safety of that amenity. And we've identified a couple of areas of improvement going forward in the future that we want to work with them on. And one of the important components of that, of course, is Transport Canada's support of funding to address those improvements. And so we want to ensure that those supports stay in place so that we can undertake those improvements. The third piece that we've included in there is more along the lines of the work that we're doing within the region to adjust to the transition away from our coal energy source and looking for new ways to create sustainability and economic opportunity for our region. The federal government has funded our regional plan that we're undertaking right now, but that's really just a first step in what we need to do to create opportunities and draw new industry and new employment opportunities for our residents. So we want to ensure that the federal government stays engaged with that process with us. The final piece really is around housing, and we've seen some work happening in our community with that through the Meridian Foundation. And again, this is an important area that affects all municipalities across the country, and certainly ours as well, is looking for support through all levels of government to create affordable housing opportunities for those citizens that require it, and how we can work with agencies like the Meridian Foundation. So the federal government is a pretty significant partner in that process, and in 2017 they laid out the National Housing Strategy that speaks specifically to how they will support that, and we want to ensure the next federal government does follow through on those commitments. Excuse me. So those are my comments tonight, and if I'd be happy to answer any questions of council at this time.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions regarding the advocacy strategy that was put forward by administration? Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking through this beautiful booklet that we got this evening. I'm wondering if we have produced this pamphlet for any of our partners to host in say their organization, FCSS, the library, to make it accessible so that all of our major partners within the town are speaking the same language and talking about the same priorities that they would like to ask the candidates. Mr. Mayor, I answered my door just a few days ago, and the candidates are already out and they're already canvassing. If we had our residents speaking to these very same priorities, how effective would that be when one of the candidates come to our door? So I'm wondering about a communication plan to our residents so that they know what we're advocating for, and also to our organization partners so that they too can be advocating, speaking the same language that that we all want to promote in this campaign.
Yes, so I do believe we have a communication plan going.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Bennett and all of Council. We do articulate our strategy through, primarily through social media, through our website, and our direct communications that we conduct with the candidates as well as our stakeholders. In terms of the mass production of the brochure that I've shared with you this evening, it's not an intent that we allocate significant resources to do that. I think we want to do it very targeted and sparingly, but we do intend to circulate that to our key stakeholders and ensure that they understand what our priorities are as well. And where we can do that electronically, we'll certainly do as much as possible. And as I said, probably print sparingly to distribute where needed. But that is our intent. And really the crux of what we do is very specific and targeted to the candidates, and often it's very effective through the work that you as council members do as ambassadors for this plan, and in the communication that you have over the next number of weeks with key stakeholders. So I know that you will be sharing those handfuls of copies of that and articulating that to those that you're having conversations with over the next number of weeks as well.
Good. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Matthews, go ahead.
Through to administration. Just a couple of comments. Very much appreciate the growth in the gas tax fund in terms of ensuring that we have predictable funding moving forward, rail safety, and I guess I wonder if there's some way that we can get across to our governments how important it is to have overpasses, and I don't see that highlighted here. I definitely see the problem looking at the picture, but maybe some way to make it very clear of what it is that we need in this community. I was just in Invermere, and there's a town of 4,300 people with this beautiful overpass. They don't have one single problem with trains, maybe outside of a little noise here or there. So it's just important that we share that. And what's the other comment? Oh yes, making housing affordable for all. It's not just housing, it's the cost of living for the majority of Canadians that are struggling to make ends meet. And we think, well, people aren't putting money away and stuff. Well, a lot of people, whether if you're working for a business or you're working in the private sector, you don't have a lot of opportunity to save, and you can hardly make ends meet in a lot of cases. So it's important that we get across to all levels of government how important it is not only to make housing affordable for people that need that, but overall just our cost of living is high, and if we can look at ways to be more efficient as a country, that would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for comments. Any questions, comments regarding that? No. Thank you for putting this together, and definitely this is a good strategy to have with all the candidates that are running for the federal election to make sure that they understand what the town of Stony Plain's key goals are and what we need in our community. Just a little bit of tidbit. In our community, as a municipality, a town, city, county, we have two ways to raise revenue. And I was mentioning it beforehand in the financial trends report: taxes and user fees. And that's all we can do. Those taxes and et cetera equate to 8 cents on every tax dollar that is collected in this country. 8 cents. So when we think about the provincial government and the federal government reducing their spending and cutting organizations, cutting funding to municipal groups and towns and cities, well, they're cutting from 92% of the tax dollar, which is a lot easier than for us as municipalities to cut from the 8% of the tax dollar. Because when those groups lose their funding and the grant dollars are not there, where are they coming? They're coming to us, because we're right here in the community working with them, providing services for our residents, and we are here where the need is. So the next couple of years, as the financial economy stays where it is and stagnant, and both the provincial government and the federal government are putting signs up of cutting and reducing funding for all municipalities and all groups, etc., we as a council is going to have a really hard time to decide what we can afford to fund and what we cannot afford to fund. And sometimes it might be just giving it back to the province and the federal government saying, this is your responsibility. We cannot shoulder that responsibility anymore, and just turn the keys back over to them. But that is something that us as a council has to decide where we put that foot down. And hopefully it starts soon with the key priorities pushed forward. Thank you. And I believe Councillor Bennett had made the motion, so I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I make motion that Town Council appoint Metrics Group as external auditors for the years ended December 31st, 2019 to 20 and to 21.
Okay. Go ahead, Administration.
Your Worship and Council, as you know, our Manager of Financial Services is retiring in a few short months. And so I have to my right here Riley Clark, our Senior Financial Analyst, who is sort of her right-hand man. And so he's going to present to you tonight what we've come through to come and appoint the external auditor for your recommendation tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. So Council had directed administration to proceed with a request for proposal for our external audit services. So the town had done so through the Alberta Purchasing Connection in June 2019. So from that, we had 3 submitted proposals. We evaluated them against 4 different criteria, including pricing, their methodology, their qualifications, reputation, and their other municipal references. So after doing this evaluation, we had selected Metrics Group as they had the highest consensus score, and that's our current auditor for the 2018 year. So based on that, administration recommended that council appoints Metrics for the next 3 years, which was the 3 years we determined in the request for proposal contract.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, members of council, any questions or comments regarding the proposed motion and the presentation? Okay. No, sounds good. Just one question regarding the point scoring, points for 30 for pricing and plan strategy, etc. Are those the industry norms for this kind of request?
Yes. Yeah. Those are standard.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I don't see more hands up, so I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Councilor Pletchko, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The council approved the terms and conditions of sale for the 2019 public auction as presented.
Okay. And again, this is a yearly occurrence that happens. So go ahead, administration.
So as you noted, this is a annual occurrence where this is the end of a 3-year cycle for which the MGA dictates how the town follows collection of outstanding tax arrears. So this is the final step of the process for the town, which is a public auction where the selected properties are available for sale. We've stated a reserve bid price based on the assessment value of the property, which is standard practice. And we have the auction currently scheduled for November 29th of 2019.
Okay. Thank you. And you said that this is a 3-year cycle, so we would say that the taxes in arrears are since 2016?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions and comments? No. Okay. So just questions. So if these properties that are listed and if the owner has come to the town with an agreement to kind of a payment plan, will that offset this, or do they have to pay the entire taxes owing in one payment?
Yes, the only way to become off the list is to fully pay off the outstanding taxes.
Okay, so that's the 2016, or do they have to do the 17, 18 as well?
Yes, it'd be the full 3 years. They have to clear title to $0, correct? Sorry, yes, they'd have to pay it, or we enter into an agreement where the town accepts a payment period, and that also would remove it from the auction.
Okay.
So yeah, and if the agreement is voided at any point, then they jump right back into the auction process.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, to follow up on the last comment in regards to returning back to the auction process. So if an agreement is made and that agreement is voided because it hasn't been adhered to, is that property then allowed to wait until the next year's auction? So, you know, if an agreement was made, say now, and by January it's already been voided, do they still get to wait until next November? Or is an auction held within a certain amount of time of that agreement being voided?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, we have the ability to set another auction for this properties that have voided their contracts. So we were not required to wait another year. We can have the auction at any point.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep. Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What happens if no one bids on these properties?
Your Worship, through to council, we did have that once. We had one auction since I've been here, and there was nobody that showed up. So we before we took possession of the property, they actually sold the property. So we didn't have to go any further with it. But the town would become the owners of the property, and we would probably try to sell it. And we would take the amount that's owed to us and return the rest of the money to the owner.
And we what?
Return the rest of the money for the property to the owner. Like, we would only claim what we are owed.
Okay, Councillor Pletchko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through to administration. So of the properties that are there, that are listed below, if there is nothing that meets the market value, what happens at that point in time?
So if the assessed values are not met, then I believe there's no, the ownership, they would need to hit the minimum bid in order to take ownership, otherwise it would revert to the town. So if the reserve bids aren't met, then the town, the next step in the process would be the town, as the manager had discussed, the town taking title at that point.
So follow-up question to that, if the town takes title, then what is the process then? Will it be listed through a realtor? Will it be back up for auction? And if at that time neither the listed market value is obtainable and or there is no bid that's that high, what happens to the property at that time?
It would remain with the town until a point where we could sell it, or to hit a bid that would be considered reasonable.
Does the bid, so follow up again, sorry. So then does the bid, you made point to a bid, can the town accept a value determined once the town owns it that's acceptable to them? So I'll give you a number. If it's a $252,000 market value and you get a $100,000 bid, which takes care of the tax basically that we're owed, would the town be in a position to actually accept a lower bid at any point in time? Or is the town held to an accountability standard of the actual market value to sell that home?
As far as I understand, the reserve bid is solely for the auction, and after that point, the property reverts to the town, and it would be the town's decision of what price it was sold at.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. That actually kind of just ties into my question too, because that clears it up. Because if nobody bids on it and the town has to take ownership of it, market value is what two people are willing to pay for it, a buyer and a seller. And if the seller is asking for an amount that no buyer is willing to give, then we don't have market value. So is that, in terms of the bidding process, I know we listed the market values based on whatever plan we have. It's actually just kind of backwards. Would you not list that market value and just ask for bids? Because then that gives us the ability to look at it instead of saying this is all we take, and if nobody wants to bid that, then we don't have anything.
Yeah, Your Worship, the standard practice is to set it at the assessed value, it's mostly to discourage people coming to try lowball bid. It's kind of ensuring that anyone who is attempting to bid for the property has a actual desire to purchase it at the that value. But like I said, that merely sets it for the auction. And after that point, if it reverts to the town, it does open up more possibilities outside of that.
Okay, sounds good. Any other hands up? Councilor Matties?
Sorry, Your Worship, through to administration. I'd like to have an example with these condos that are all in Somerville. So if there's no buyers for these, and so the town takes over ownership of it, and then we try to sell it, but it's part of another, like, can you help me? This is a little more complicated situation as to what is the potential outcomes or different outcomes that could happen as a result of this block of properties that I think would be owned by one person, right? Or one business.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, it's definitely a complex situation. I guess we're hoping the best case scenario happens, that they do pay the taxes before the date and we don't have to go down this path. If they do not, then I think, we'd further explore all the options and clearly present. The municipality can do a number of different things, but it's definitely a messy one, if I can say it that way. But you would hold the value in the land, and the town can hold that for as long as they see fit until they are able to recover the taxes owed there. And do whatever makes sense at the time into the future.
Okay.
It's about the control of that land and the value there.
All right, so basically the town would have complete flexibility to do what they wish once you've taken ownership, is that correct?
Once you take the title, yes.
And how long does it take to take the title?
I mean, it's all legislated, so if they did not pay, then we would continue down that path. And so I don't know those dates off the top of my head, but we can definitely brief you as we kind of go down this path.
Thank you.
Yeah, Your Worship, maybe just a couple other things I'll add on there too. So historically, I think the manager mentioned in a number of years, I think it's rare that we actually see something go to auction. In the event that it does, there's a process for that, market values and so on and so forth. But to jump to the end of the story too, at some point in time, tax title property can and does come back to the municipality. It's not very common in communities like ours. The market values tend to be there and someone tends to want to buy it. But, there are points in time where the title is reverted back to the municipality. And at that point in time, it's simply you free and clear own it. It's the property of the town, just like anything else we may buy. And you can do as you see fit with it, whether turn it into a park, sell it for $1, whatever you want to do. Typically doesn't happen here. I wouldn't expect it to happen in Stony Plain, frankly, but that is ultimately one of the end results of this process in a municipal setting.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? So I have another question, because we talk about market value all the time, but when we deal with property taxes, we do about assessed value. So explain why we're not trying to auction it off at assessed value versus market value, because when we do assessment for taxes, we use assessed value and not market value.
Yes, Your Worship. The values we've set as market on this case are the assessed values for the properties. So that is the bidding price for these points, is the assessed value that we've used for calculation of the property taxes.
Okay, so would it not be a little better to use the word assessed value instead of market value?
Yes, I believe it's a legislated form. I'm not 100% sure, but yes, I can.
Okay. Yes, because it says market value.
It does on there, but at the top it explains the assessed values for property currently being offered for sale at the 2019 public auction market value.
Okay.
Yes, it's because, yeah, we do have it. This is the assessed value as the starting point for any bids. Is the reasoning behind it? It's kind of our bottom floor.
Okay, thank you. And then, so the assessed value is based on 2016 figures?
No, that would be, sorry, Your Worship, it would be based on the 2018 property tax values. The current, the most recent assessed value which we have.
Okay. So we're assessed value of 2018, but we're collecting taxes for 2016.
Yes, on these properties, they would be 2016, 17, and 18, all would be in arrears.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of understanding clarity? Okay, I'll see no more hands up. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, we'll move on to information items and council discussion. Councillor Matties, go ahead.
A couple of things I'd like to mention. So first of all, I had a little vacation with my husband and had the opportunity to go to Banff. In putting my councillor hat on, I toured the Fenland Centre in Banff, which is directly off of the highway, very, very accessible in the community. And it was a two-phased-in recreation complex as well. So basically started out with an NHL hockey arena, and then 5 years ago they set up a 4-rinks curling rink as well as another arena. And the 4-rink curling rink is used for multi-purpose for events. Then in the summer they have a family fun zone, so they'll have like bouncy castles and things like that for kids, and they charge $4 for drop-in. They have rates for monthly and every 3 months, etc. So it just was a beautiful, beautiful center, an example of a staged or a phased-in approach to building a rec complex, and I did provide that information to administration. My second comment was with regards to the last meeting with Mr. Hands on compensation. And I do believe that there should be full transparency in municipal government with regards to the comparison with regards to different municipalities, how the base compensation plus per diems and things like that, so that it is clear that when a councillor is working at a meeting, et cetera, that they're being paid for that, as opposed to not knowing what a councillor is doing in the community for their compensation. So I would like to see that on our website that an individual could access that. It seemed that was a concern for him, that he couldn't get the correct information. And that's all I have.
Yes, I think I was trying to explain to Mr. Hans is that we do not do the per diems anymore.
I know.
And then, so that's the difference as well. And also, he compared this year's number to 2012, which in 2012, we didn't have the 1/3 non-taxable taken away from us, which then, again, adjusted our revenue, because, again, it was hard to explain, because he was just looking at the numbers and not what went into the numbers.
But if it was on the website as to how things have changed, so that people would be able to accurately assess the compensation of council, because doesn't describe the changes that have happened, right?
Councillor Loy?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I also attended in Morinville, their new leisure center there, and it is a progressive thing, much like Banff, and where they put in a field house and had indoor soccer and stuff like that. They have an NHL-sized arena, ice sheets wise, that seats about 450 spectators, and has a weight room, has all little different things. It's 1/3 of what's going to happen next year, or no, I shouldn't say next year. The next phase is they're going to be having aquatics, and then the third phase is going to be another covered arena with curling on it. So it's very close. I imagine if you're up to Morinville area sometime and poke your head in, they'll give you a quick tour of it around there. It gives us an idea. And for Mr. Hill, I will provide you with this brochure after, so that you can add that to your collection. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pacheco?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. In regards to a couple of questions that we were asked at last council meeting regarding the wastewater commission, wet water flow management strategies, and the center trunk line. In answer to a couple of questions, one was regarding penalties against us if we did not complete our report. Currently, the commission is in no position to be able to assess penalties against that. So we would be fortunate enough not to have to pay it, but it's highly recommended that we do the report and get it in. The second question was in regards to the central trunk line that is within our community. That is owned by the town of Stony Plain, so any upgrades to that will be at the cost of Stony Plain. Other than that, I have nothing to report.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just let the rest of council know about my opportunity to visit Cynthia Furiers. I'm sure I'm butchering that last name. Her gallery opening at the Multicultural Center was a pleasure to attend this weekend. Actually, it was fairly well attended. Of all the ones that I've been to, this one had the artist herself and her children that were also featured in many of her, or all of her paintings. But there was also many residents that made it there as well. There was coffee and tea and whatnot provided, so it was a nice experience. And if anybody else has the opportunity to make it down there, they are very sharp pictures and worth the look at.
Good, thank you. Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had an interesting discussion with a resident this past week, and I told him that I would pass it along to our Community and Protective Service Department. It was an interesting discussion in that he had noticed our gun show that is being advertised on the boards that are out on the highway. And it was unfortunate that the advertisement went up just days after the shootings in Texas and in Ohio. And he thought that was rather distasteful that we would display that. I explained to him about our leasing policy but I kind of saw where he was coming from, and sometimes we just need to be a little sensitive about some of the signs that we display and when they go up. And this was something I don't think we could have foreseen, but it was poor timing, and I don't think that it was really. I don't think we do the advertising for it. It is the organization that rents the facility, and that's what I explained to him. But he didn't seem to think that the gun show would be, it kind of makes Stony Plain look like a hick town. And so, as I said, we had a very interesting discussion about it and about leasing our building and how we don't censor organizations that lease it. But I thought I'd just bring it to all of our attention because it was something that personally I didn't notice that, and our residents are watching.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Laurie.
Your Worship, just as a follow-up to my colleague's comments, I was contacted by the same resident. Very adamant that the town of Stony Plain was not in a favorable position in development that did not belong in the community. So he definitely had some very strong views. I have had a few discussions with some other residents who have had just in the public meetings. And I briefly ran it by. I haven't found any residents who have concern, but obviously, we have to understand it. Different events will have different impact on many different residents. I think always be sure we're considering whether it comes to signage, hosting events, so on. I wanted to share a couple of things. First, I did forget to share this update at our last one, so I wanted to share today. On Wednesday, August 21st, Councillor Matties and I actually had the opportunity to attend a blanket exercise at Heritage Pavilion. This was put on through our office with the conjunction of the Alberta Group of Municipalities Association, welcoming and inclusive communities. Brady from AUMA was there as well, and was a wonderful facilitator. Part of this is that in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action, there are 94 is calling upon federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to provide education to public servants on the history of Aboriginal peoples, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous law, and Aboriginal Crown relations. This will require skills-based training on intercultural competency, conflict resolution, human rights, and anti-racism. I think the event lasted about 3 hours that Councillor Matties and I were there, and I must say, in those 3 hours, the amount of education we received going through this exercise, which is very a lived experience exercise, was absolutely valuable. I have yet to have experienced in a long time receiving such knowledge imparted to me in such a short amount of time. So I would encourage all of council to make sure that when opportunities arise to take these type of events, even if you have done something similar before, to do so. There's one thing that was shared to us by several members who actually attended the blanket exercises. They had done several before, but what they have found is that each one is different based on the people who participate and based on the conversations that are brought about by that. So again, I was very, very thankful that that initiative was here in our community. We were one of very few communities who were selected by the AUMA. We did have to apply to host this. We were joined by other councillors from Spruce Grove, Parkland County, Monterey, Alberta Beach, and I know there were a few others, as well as various members of staff and administration from those communities as well. I think we had about 25 to 30 people attend the event. It was very well done, and again, the learnings and the lessons from that very short event definitely brought myself a lot further along the lines of the Truth and Reconciliation movement calls to action as to why they're in place and how we came to be where we are. Second, I also wanted to commend the organizers and the town's participation in the Rotary Run for Life yesterday. I understand this was the highest attended Rotary Run for Life event that has occurred for us since the 16th annual. The weather was perfect for those of us who were running it, not too hot, not too cold. The rain held off until afterwards, so very thankful for that. As well, this morning, I was very honored to attend with fellow councillors the RCMP flag raising at the new detachment. I was also very honored to be one of the first people to use the new detachment, thankfully not as one of the first attendants that sells it back. So it was very nice to see it. I managed to drop my criminal record check off 2 weeks ago at the old detachment, and there were 6 people in the waiting room, and I couldn't believe how little room we had. So when I went to collect my criminal record check today with the beautiful new facility and the wonderful public area that there is in there, it's quite comfortable. I can see that being a great benefit for our residents in the future. Looking forward to getting back in the swing of things. I'm sure council all has on the calendar, but the mural unveiling, the ball market coming up. One thing that I know hasn't come out yet, but I encourage council to attend, is through a coordinated suicide prevention program. They are working at the community garden this Saturday to rebuild some of the garden beds. I think it's tough enough to talk or something along those lines is the theme on it. So come on out and help rebuild some of those beds and enjoy the conversation centered around mental health. And as well, we had another flag raising today. We're proudly flying the Terry Fox flag outside town office for I believe the next week. Very happy to see that up, and I'm looking forward to attending the run next Sunday. So, Your Worship, that's all.
Okay, thank you for the update. And I guess it's my turn, maybe just a couple questions for administration. Can we get an update on Highway 779 and the construction that's going through Willow Park, and what the future holds for that?
Your Worship, can I get clarification in the last part? You just said an update on 779 and...
Yeah, it's going through Willow Park, and then the future of the entire project. As we know, this is September 9th, and it's very, very cool out there. Very unseasonably cool.
So, Your Worship, the last information we had last week was that the paving was due to be finished tomorrow, and then the road would be reopened. The detour would be closed. So I don't know what the weather today and tomorrow, how that impacts the plan, but I guess that was the plan heading into the weekend. And then they were looking at redoing their schedule, and they understood that we wanted a report on a public report on timing, et cetera. So they are meeting and putting that together for us. They are invited to come to council. I believe the meeting in October when the MLA is here. So they're preparing for that as well. So more information on the schedule, including the projected works to be completed this year versus next year, is coming from Alberta Transportation.
Another question regarding the West Terrace subdivision. Getting quite a few calls regarding break and enters and theft happening in that subdivision. Are there any? Is the administration hearing a lot of reports regarding that? And then do we address that to the RCMP or through our community peace officers?
Your Worship, certainly I can contact Inspector Locken tomorrow and see if he's got more information about that. From a community peace officer perspective, it's a criminal code matter, so they wouldn't be able to enforce those types of events. Certainly their presence in those areas would deter, but if they saw someone breaking into, they could hold them but not necessarily charge them. So certainly I'll chat with Inspector Locken. I know in my own neighborhood there's been a few Facebook posts about doorbell cams watching people check cars. So I think that's pretty prevalent. I don't know that that's increased. I don't know that's decreased. I just think people are catching it more often because there's cameras outside people's garages, on their doorbells, and those types of things. So due diligence again with the community in terms of making sure that your personal items are locked. That includes your house, your garage, and your vehicles is the best deterrent, because for the most part it's people checking quickly, taking what they can get that's visible. They're not smashing windows and doing destructive things with vehicles. They're basically checking handles and looking for an easy entry into a particular vehicle or personal property. So I can check with Inspector Locken and provide you an email update as to whether or not there's been an increase or they're aware of an increase in those particular areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. And with that, members of council, on tomorrow actually is the builders and developers reception. Again, that's the time that we thank and we work with our partners, the development community and realtors. So hopefully you guys are all there. On the 11th, thank you, Deputy Mayor. You'll be presenting the Young Entrepreneurs Training. Just congratulating the individuals through Community Futures that have been awarded a grant for the summer, so thank you for that. As well, the 14th is the Good Sam mural unveiling. If you have the chance, make sure you attend. I will not be there, and Deputy Mayor Meyer will be stepping in on my behalf again to take care of that. The 14th is the Fall Market down around Main Street here. It is an excellent time to come out and meet and network with our residents. Good to chat them about storm sewer, Old Town Community Plan, and everything else underneath the sun. The 15th is the Terry Fox Run. If you signed up and volunteered, we'll see you there. The 19th is the Chamber of Commerce Milestones and Merits Awards. Again, that's the time that we take and we recognize businesses that are celebrating a milestone or a merit. Again, that's a program that the Chamber and the town does to make sure that we try to keep engaged the business community. And the 21st is the first annual Neighbor Day in the community. If you haven't picked up your packages, you can do so at FCSS, and you can host a little neighborhood barbecue. There is a big kickoff here at the Town Hall at Chicago Park. What time is that? 9. Thank you. 9 o'clock. That's why I have Deputy Mayor. And I think that's this Neighbor Day came out of the Mayor's Task Force on Community Development and Volunteerism, of how to get re-engaged in the community. And in a society where we're connected to everyone halfway across the world, we're losing connection with the guy that's just half a block down the street. So I think Neighbor Day will give us the opportunity to reconnect with our residents and with each other so that, again, safer community, we'll talk about crime, knowing your neighbors will reduce that as well. And that evening is the Good Sam's Lobster Fest. I believe the email was sent out, so if you accepted that, we'll be seeing you there. And again, they're celebrating, I think, 70 years in our community, so it'll be a good time to visit and celebrate Good Sam's work in our community for the last 70 years. And I will be heading down to Lethbridge in a couple of days with the town manager to the Mid-Sized Cities Caucus. At that time, usually a 2.5-day event that will meet with municipalities that are 15,000 plus, up to about 100 and change, where we discuss a few things. I think the number one topic is the Blue Ribbon Panel report, how that's going to affect each and every one of us. We're not having rose-colored glasses. We believe that we're going to get cut in funding about 25 to 30%. So we got to brace for what's coming on, and we got to figure out as a town council where we go from there after that's been announced. As well, the premier and a few ministers will be down there, so we'll be lobbying hard for our initiatives that we lobby for during the provincial government, provincial election, and also what we need for our community to continue to grow and thrive and to maintain our services for our residents. Okay. With that, that's my update. Moving forward, next is closed meeting. So closed meeting is when we have a meeting to discuss things that are legal, labor, and land related with members of council. All public and media have to leave, and we will call them back in once we're finished that part of the agenda. No motions are made in camera except for the motion to move out, and at that time we'll invite anybody that's waiting or that wants to be notified the opportunity to come back to council before we finish off our meeting. Okay. With that, I need a motion. Go ahead, Councillor Loy. Councillor to close session.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, that
camera. Councillor Matthews, please.
I move to make motion to move out of camera.
Okay, so the motion to move out of camera. All in favor? Okay, that is cleared. Passed. And moving on to 12.1 is the Regional Transit September update. And if I have a motion for that as well, Councillor Laurie, please.
Your Worship, I'll move the council accepts the Regional Transit Service Committee August update report for information.
Okay, thank you.
It was the August report, though.
Any comments from administration? No, see none. Any comments from council? Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. That is done. Thank you very much, administration, for your work. And again, that was a lot of heavy lifting in the Old Town Community Core Plan. I definitely appreciate the work that's done to the contractors and to our staff and members of council. Thank you for taking the time to read the details and looking at it, because we are securing our future for our community. With that, adjourned. Thank you.